Right, members, can we all take our seats, please? Right, members, welcome to the full council meeting of Derbyshire Dales District Council, held in the council chamber at 6 p.m. on Thursday the 25th of January 2024. My name's Steve Wayne. I'm the chair of the council, and to my right is the vice chair, Dawn Gretrix. To her right is Paul Wilson. Then it's David Burton, who's the civic chair. Paul Wilson's the chief executive, by the way. How remiss of me. And at the end is Councillor Slack, who's the deputy chair. To my left is Helen Mitchell, the monitoring officer. And there's Jason Spencer and Lucy, who's going to be taking some notes and making sure that we're legal. And that's that. I would like to open up by just saying that there are no fire drills planned, and if there is a drill, we all leave the building by the nearest exit. Lifts should not be used, and please take a few moments of your time just to see the notices above my head and over behind the other councillors at the back, and that will enable you to get out of the building safely. Right, so now we move on to apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies for absence, please?
No, we haven't, Chair. Thank you.
So, item 2 is public participation. We've got one question, and that comes from Nick Elliott, a resident of Matlock, and I've got to just declare a personal interest in that I do attend some of the meetings of the group that he may wish to talk about. So, right, Councillor Burford and Councillor Burford both have similar. So, Mr. Elliott, would you like to go ahead, please?
Certainly, and thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to pose this question briefly to Council. And I acknowledge the support that we've had from yourself and Councillors Burfoot on this. But the question is more really to get a relationship perhaps on a more of official grounding with the District Council. Matlock Community Land Trust has been established with the aim of acquiring land currently owned by the County Council to adapt the land for enhanced community use. Our plans, if successful, would deliver approximately 9 houses for affordable rent on the brownfield site, formerly the car park on Cavendish Road, along with much needed off-street parking for the area, and finally an area for allotments and recreation, now even more needed after the loss of similar provision at Stark Homes. Would elected members of the Council consider meeting Matlock Community Land Trust to explore possible avenues of partnership working and also, if possible, financial support? Can I just briefly add to that, Chair, if I can? Faith in local democracy in Matlock, particularly the area of Matlock that I come from, the sort of Matlock Bank close to this area, has been really damaged in recent months by the response we've had to from the County Council in trying to do something with this bit of land. So it's sort of a partnership working arrangement, any support we can get would go to heal that problem, because I think it is a really sad indictment of that loss of faith now in local democracy in terms of our dealings with the County Council. I hope it hasn't escaped members' notice that what we want to achieve is very much in line with the District Council's corporate plan, in line with provision of some affordable housing. The corporate plan says we want to meet local needs for the present and future. We hope, if we acquire this land around the car parking land, there'll be the potential to install some electric vehicle charging points, for example, which I also notice in the corporate plan. And the council are looking to engender a sense of a clean and green district. Well, allotments, what could be more green in that respect, replacing what is currently just neglected scrubland that's been allowed to become neglected and scrubland. It's going to be a big ask, but I'm hoping that one day we see at the entrance to this area, after it's been renewed, a sign that basically says Matlock Community Land Trust, working in partnership with Derbyshire Dales and Matlock Town Council, have delivered this area, and it will really enhance the area for local residents, rather than feeling that we'd really been ignored. In fact, I'd say worse than ignored, we've been dealt with in a rather offhandish and aggressive manner by the County Council. So many thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for taking the time to come this evening and ask that question. Councillor Flitter would like to respond, please.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for coming and telling us about what is happening up there. This council has worked successfully with community land trusts in Bradwell and Earlgrave. We recognise the valuable contribution CLTs can make in the provision of affordable homes. I understand the Housing Department and the Matlock Community Land Trust have already met twice and discussed development and finance. I am sure members would be keen to encourage further engagement with the Housing Department about how we can work together in the future. And I do take note of your comments about the corporate plan, and that is true. I personally cannot at this time commit to financial implications, but please keep talking to us and we will do whatever we can.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. We now move on to item 3 of the agenda, which is interest. Do any members have any interest that they wish to disclose at this time, please? Councillor O'Brien?
Yes, Chair. Item 10. I have a family member who benefits from the discretionary hardship fund.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors? Councillor Flitter?
Yeah, just on page 80, Chair, I have a personal interest as one of the polling stations that are mentioned in the report. I am a director of that building.
Thank you very much. No other hands in the air. Right, I'll move on to item 4 of the agenda now, which is the Chairman's announcements. I'd like to hand over to Councillor David Burton. Thank you.
Members, I think it's just appropriate on behalf of all of us that first of all we acknowledge our sadness in a way that Councillor Mark Wakeman felt he had to resign as a ward member for Bakewell. I have 2 words in front of me: outstanding and respect. He was an outstanding committed ward member and great affection in Bakewell for Mark, and brought great credibility to this council in the manner and the way he served Bakewell. So simply we say thank you to Mark for being a good councillor. I am grateful to Mark because he was one of the first councillors to respond to my appeal, which you've got in front of you tonight, so it links in very well. I was immensely touched when he came up to me and still comes up to me. I can't get him to call me David. It's Mr. Burton. And he said, Mr. Burton, I want to fund you a child. Now, that is kindness at its height. He funded me personally 1 child for my civic charity. So, on behalf of all of us, if you do look at this at any point, Mark, we do wish you well and all the very best. Members, please, in April I will be having a coffee and cake morning in 2 Dales, and down at the Belper Unitarian Chapel we will be hosting a jazz and folk music night. I will forward you those details nearer the time. I really would value any support from you, and it really would be, from my point of view, absolutely marvellous if this council, from its members and possibly 1 or 2 of the officers, could throw in a tenner and that we collectively fund 1 child to have that experience of a holiday through the Send a Child to Hucklow Fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. I'd like to endorse what he said about Councillor Wakeman. He was a pleasure to work with and very committed to his community. We now move on to item 5, which is the minute book. We're asked to receive these non-exempt minutes of the committees, and I'll just go briefly through the committees. It's the Licensing Appeals Committee of the 5th of December, the Scrutiny Committee of the 6th of December, the Community Environment Committee meeting of the 7th of December, Planning Committee of the 12th of December, the full Council on the 14th of December, and the Local Plan Subcommittee on the 20th of December. Would anybody like to move that we receive those minutes, please? Councillor Buttle? Would anybody like to second? Councillor Flitter will second. All those in favour that we receive, please. Just keep your hand up while we're counting. I think everybody. No, just open it. Right. Anybody against? And do we have any abstentions? Thank you. Right. So that's carried. Thank you. We now move on to questions under Rule of Procedure 15. These are questions from members who have given the due notice. Councillor Flitter, are you... Do you wish to put your question to Councillor Flitter, or do you just wish to... OK, thank you. That's answered then. The next one is from Councillor Hobson. Do you wish to put yours in person, or are you happy to accept that it's the written word?
I'd like to read my question, please.
OK.
Why is the full membership of Derbyshire Dales District Council being denied the opportunity to discuss the report into the independent investigation of the complaint that was sent to all councillors, and why is this information only to be discussed at committee level by 9 members?
Councillor Flitter, do you wish to verbally respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, members agreed the terms of reference at the GNR Committee in July 2023. Further to the hard work undertaken by the Constitution Working Group, in the terms of reference it clearly states that the business of this committee is to look at issues identified of significant strategic importance. It also clearly states that the council business of the committee has responsibility for complaints, HR and corporate governance. It is therefore right and proper that this matter is looked at by the Governance and Resources Committee.
Thank you. The next one is from...
Can I have my supplementary, please?
If you want a supplementary, feel free.
Thank you. Our earlier speaker, Mr. Elliott, referred to a lack of faith in local democracy. This matter is of extraordinary interest and importance to all Derbyshire Dales residents. Less than a third of all councillors, less than a third of all council members will be discussing this matter. Does the leader believe in open and transparent governance, yes or no? And will he reconsider this matter? Thank you.
Councillor Flitter.
I think we're missing the point here a little bit in what we're talking about as important and relevant. None of the 10 allegations were fully upheld. 4 were partially upheld, and that is essential to recognise. The council must and will learn from this complaint, and I have full faith in the Governance and Resource Committee to lead on that improvement. And it is also important that all complaints of this council are treated equally, and just because there are some outside members with extra political interest in this issue, it does not mean to say that we go outside the remit of the committee that has been agreed to take on this responsibility. So I will not reconsider this. We will go through the proper process. It is open and transparent, and that is for members of the council to discuss if they wish to change that in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. We must agree to differ.
Thank you both. We now move on to the approval of the minutes for the previous meeting, that being the... Sorry. I was getting ahead of myself, Councillor Murphy. You're at the bottom of the page here. But Councillor Murphy, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I do, please,
yes,
Chair.
Thank you. You feel free.
Thank you very much. In recent months, there have been major concerns about drainage and flooding issues relating to planning applications presented to the Planning Committee for consideration. Matlock and Ashbourne applications have come in for intensive scrutiny as two areas that suffer from ever increasing flooding events. Severn Trent Water have responded to applications stating they have capacity to handle ever greater amounts of drainage and sewage demand. Ward councillors have brought to the attention of members of the Planning Committee the reality of the Severn Trent water system's failings. The evidence is undeniable. The cumulative effect of all the new developments in recent years makes members wonder where is all the new infrastructure to cope with the ever-increasing demand. I would like to ask Councillor Flitter, in his role as leader of Derbyshire Dales District Council, to request Severn Trent attend a meeting with all councillors to explain how they process requests for further demands on their systems. The evidence in recent years makes one really question their responses to our planners. I am sure Councillor Flitter will agree flooding is a soul-destroying experience for all our residents, and there is very little as a local authority we can do. Further concerns surround the site of human waste and other detritus which has been proved to make local school children ill, in one example. As councillors, we have a duty of care for our residents, and with a heavy heart, we often have to approve applications that we really have little confidence in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Once again, sorry for my oversight. Councillor Flitter, please.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Dermot. Members will know that our scrutiny committee, something that I pressed for in opposition, has already set out its intention to look at this detail of this very issue. I understand that the scrutiny committee has agreed to establish a politically equal task group to move this work forward, and correspondence to group leaders has made this to establish this new task group. As part of that work, I am more than happy to support colleagues on that task group by writing to Severn Trent requesting that they attend a meeting to give evidence. I will take advice from my task group colleagues as to whether such a meeting is best served by the attendance of all members or whether it should form part of the planned work of this committee. As Councillor Murphy has a keen interest in this issue, I would encourage him to have a close interest or at least take part in this inquiry directly.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. Do you wish to come back?
Please. Are we represented on that task group? It hasn't started yet? Right, okay. Okay, well, I'd appreciate an opportunity to join that task group if there's an opportunity. You know, this is not a political item. This affects us all, and we've all been talking about these issues for 2 or 3 years now. And I'd be very surprised if Severn Trent will come along, because I've had several meetings lined up with them, and they've always cancelled them at the 11th hour. But for the sake of our residents, I think we've got to try and be seen to be making an effort to change the way Severn Trent communicate with us. Thank you.
Councillor Flitter.
Just in response to that, Chair, I can't disagree with anything that Dermot has just said. It's a very delicate issue. It affects the whole of the district, and the sooner that we can get and bring to task the authorities that are in control, it would be better for all residents. And I would urge Dermot to put his case forward to be part of that equal political task group, so that all members can work on that and we get a broad spectrum of views. So that you'd have to take up with your leader.
Thank you. Thank you.
One thing, it's not a question, but this situation we have with Severn Trent, I was at a meeting recently with other councillors from other areas, and everybody has got a problem with Severn Trent. It's not just us, obviously, but you know, I mean, maybe we should speak to other authorities and garner support from them as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. Now we will go on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting on the 14th of December. Has everybody had opportunity to read them and digest them? Are there any points that anybody wishes to raise on them? No? Would anybody like to move them?
Move them, Chair.
Move. Thank Councillor Burton, that we receive them. Second by Councillor Burfoot. Could we vote for all those in favour, please? And all those against? Just one. And abstentions? 1, 2, 3 abstentions. They're duly received. Thank you. Approved, thank you. We now move on to item 8, which is the Derby and Derbyshire Strategic Leadership Board. This report provides the Council with an update on the work taking place with Derbyshire and Derby councils. I'm going to ask Paul Wilson, the Chief Executive, to present this report. But first of all, I will say that once we do move into questions, I want questions, and I want them to be concise, please, because we don't want another 10 o'clock finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is quite a detailed report which does seek to update members on the work that has been taking place over the past few months in order to potentially facilitate the establishment of a new joint committee to represent all Derbyshire councils termed the Strategic Leadership Board. Members have before them this evening 8 recommendations within the report, 6 of which are for this council to note. 2 of the recommendations do require specific consideration and approval of members to particular propositions. If I could draw members' attention to recommendation 4, this does require the Council to nominate representation to the Strategic Leadership Board should this report be approved this evening. There is the expectation that the Council representative should be the leader of the Council, so that is the recommendation that I put forward, but there is also a requirement for Council to nominate a substitute, and that's for Council to determine this evening. In terms of the background and context to this, clearly as we are moving towards the establishment of an East Midlands mayoral combined authority, there is a need to ensure that all Derbyshire districts are properly represented through the appropriate mechanisms that will exist in order to support that combined authority. During the past few months there has been various reviews undertaken of the existing governance structures, principally around the Vision Derbyshire concept, which this council agreed to join back in 2019. A review of that joint committee has taken place, and members can see in the report the outcomes of that particular review. I think it's fair to say that whilst Vision Derbyshire did deliver some benefits, it certainly didn't deliver on the scale originally expected, and that was partly due to the fact that not all councils felt able to actually join into those particular arrangements. In terms of other joint arrangements that have existed since 2013, this council has participated in the Joint Committee for Economic Prosperity. That has been a very productive joint committee for this council in order that we can drive forward many of our economic development initiatives and secure partnership agreement to delivering on the council's corporate ambitions in those particular areas. So the report really seeks to bring the best of those 2 joint committees into one common structure, and that's where the Strategic Leadership Board is really based and is looking to take forward. The concept is very much on the same basis of a joint committee, with all representation being from councils who are prepared to participate in those arrangements, and the functions of that joint committee are exactly the same functions which this council currently discusses through the joint committees that have existed since 2013 and 2019. I think the important thing to bear in mind is that, as with the mayoral combined authority arrangements, it is for this council to determine any additional items that it wishes to put into the remit of that Strategic Leadership Board if established, and the District Council retains full sovereignty over all its existing services and responsibilities. That is clearly something that we are very precious about, and all Derbyshire councils maintain that particular position. In terms of the terms of reference for the Strategic Leadership Board, these have been formulated very much on the basis of the previous Vision Derbyshire arrangements and the arrangements for the Economic Prosperity Committee. They have been considered by all the monitoring officers, representative of all the district councils in Derbyshire, including Derby City and also Derbyshire County Council. And the draft that's before you this evening is the very first draft. It is likely that items of this may well change, and if there are significant changes made, they will be brought back for members' attention and endorsement as necessary. All councils in Derbyshire are being asked to take a report of this nature through their decision-making structures. Derbyshire Dales is the first, given the meeting cycle that we have, but over the next 2 months all councils will be taking a similar report, and the intention is that the first meeting, if agreed, of the Strategic Leadership Board would take place in March or April of this year, prior to the mayoral combined elections taking place in May. I'm happy for the rest of the report to be taken as read, Chair. There is a section in there in terms of delivery arrangements and resources. I would just like to draw members' attention to paragraph 3.29. Members will recall that this council did make a financial commitment to Vision Derbyshire. That financial resource was not utilised through the work of Vision Derbyshire, and therefore the council will be receiving a refund of just over £52,000, which reflects the contribution we made at the time. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I note your comment about keeping them short, and your comment to me before the meeting about keeping my questions short. So I'll do that. Paul, thank you for that introduction, and also the comments about the scope of the strategic board and the possibility of other things being added to that scope. The areas of responsibility include transport, quite rightly, but do not include other infrastructure, particularly sewage and drainage. And picking up on Dermot's point, they don't include electricity distribution and don't include telecommunications. We are all aware of flooding arising from sewage overflowing into streets, gardens and houses, and fluvial flooding, which is increasingly impacting many areas of Derbyshire. I believe we are all aware also of the prospective increased demand for electricity as it substitutes for gas in domestic and business applications, and the necessity of excellent ubiquitous telecommunications, particularly mobile broadband, for the Internet of Things that is already embracing agriculture, utilities, transport and finance. Electricity and telecommunications are planned at a regional, and also drainage infrastructure is planned at a regional, national and international level. Could you comment on how the mayoral authority and the D2 board will influence decision making in these areas?
Mr. Wilson. Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the detail around those types of issues is still to be worked up, and the Strategic Leadership Board has been formulated very much on the basis of the existing scope of the Economic Prosperity Committee, plus the actual detailed asks that were included within the devolution deal. But I think it's fair to say that there is a very strong ambition to progress those areas into many of the areas that you've raised there, Councillor Hughes, in terms of exerting influence with the relevant bodies to try and make sure that investment decisions are taken, that infrastructure is improved. And I'm very happy to take those points back and feed those in to the deliberations which we've been asked to do as we move forward.
Thank you very much. I'll just take one other point, really, and that is on our ability to influence the mayoral authority and perhaps DLUC as well. And we're putting another layer of committee in between us and the mayoral authority, which means that we will have Derbyshire Dales will have to go through this committee to get it input into the mayoral authority, and then we'll have to go through this committee, DLUC, and the mayoral authority to get into DLUC. Have you thought about how we might maintain our current pretty good influence on DLUC, evidenced by the funding that we've got, levelling up funding we've got, and other funding that we've achieved over the last 18 months, 2 years? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, absolutely that arrangement would need to exist in terms of us feeding through Strategic Leadership Board. Clearly at the moment there is the potential that we feed through 2 other joint committees under the existing arrangements of Vision Derbyshire and the Economic Prosperity, which is what we're trying to condense. But you're absolutely right, there would be a need to go through that. And I think the important thing is that, whilst this district council may not have a seat around the table of the mayoral combined authority, I think having a seat around this particular table would allow the leader and the substitute to actually exert the influence and try and get the best deal for this authority, which every other district in Derbyshire will seek to do likewise. But I think outside of the governance structures, you're absolutely right. We have been very successful in liaising direct with DLUC, and through our economic regeneration team and the resources that the council has put in to that team of late, we're certainly better equipped to do that and continue with that particular initiative. So even though we may not always go through the mayoral combined authorities in order to get what we want, that avenue to DLUC certainly exists and will continue to exploit all opportunities.
All right, thank you very much. One with permission.
One final short question, is it, Councillor Hughes?
It's about planning, and I note that there is a planning function involved in the strategic board as well. And how does that influence our ability to develop a local plan for ourselves? And also, will the Peak Park Planning Authority be on the committee separately and able to influence the work of the under planning?
In terms of our local plan preparation, that is not a responsibility which would be ceded to the Combined Authority or Strategic Leadership Board, and there is a discussion still to be had in terms of Peak Park representation on these structures.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor O'Brien, questions, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Questions relate to paragraphs 311 and 322 in the report. Paragraph 311 says that constituent authorities will be encouraged to delegate functions to this new board. So my first question is, can you give examples of which functions you would suggest that this council might consider delegating to the board? And in relation to paragraph 322, this states clearly that constituent authorities will only have voting rights if they delegate functions. This suggests to me that unless we delegate functions, we will have no voting rights and therefore have very limited influence on the board, and also says to me that if no authorities delegate any functions, then the board is a worthless exercise. Would you like to comment on those two questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the functions to be delegated, they're no different to the functions that we currently delegate through the Economic Prosperity Committee, and that is principally in around to joint work on the business rates pooling and the distribution of that. There are certain elements of our economic development work which we do in collaboration with the County Council and also through the D2 and 2 structures. But any other responsibilities that we would want to delegate could only be done so through the approval of this council. So at the moment it's very much focused around the economic regeneration agendas, which is already addressed through the EPC. There is nothing in addition to that which we're currently proposing to delegate.
And in relation to voting rights, unless we formally agree to delegate? Correct, and if we don't formally agree to delegate functions, we have no voting rights.
That's correct in terms of the draft terms of reference.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. We already know that we've got one member each on all the district and borough councils on the Derbyshire local strategic plan, but the combined authority, there's only 2 members from all the districts in Derbyshire and the boroughs in Derbyshire. We are to, and I believe Derbyshire Dales hasn't got a member on the combined authority. Same as the councillors already, Councillor O'Brien's put a number of points where we are at a deficit with the combined authority. Is there any chance that through the DLUCs that we can force the combined authorities to increase on borough and district councillors so for more representation?
Through you, Chair, no, you can't exert any influence on that because the actual membership of the Combined Authority has been set in legislation. Now, in terms of who the representatives should be, one of the functions of the Strategic Leadership Board, if established, is that they would actually determine who the representatives from Derbyshire districts and boroughs should be. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Slack. In terms of the current arrangements which are being put in place in the run-up to the elections, there are two representatives, the leader of High Peak Borough Council and the leader of Chesterfield Borough Council, but it will be for the districts on the SLB to determine representation in the future. And the intention is that those nominations will be made on an annual basis.
Thank you. Councillor Shelley, question please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a follow-up to Councillor O'Brien's question there about the implications of Section 3.22. Do I understand this right then, that although the Council has already delegated some functions to this body in the form of economic regeneration, does that mean that we do or do not have voting rights on it? So those are already functions which have been delegated. So does that mean we've automatically got voting rights or not?
If the Council chooses to agree to this report this evening and becomes a member of the SLB, then yes, you'll continue to have voting rights. I think use of the term functions can be a bit misleading because it's more areas of joint working, influence, collaboration. It's not specific functions as you may understand them to be in terms of a delivery of a service, for example, but it is very much around the remit of how can we maximise resources that come into the Combined Authority ultimately, or through the existing governance structures that we have for the benefit of both individual districts and Derbyshire. So I give the example of economic regeneration because that's the most significant area of activity which this Council has participated in and we've benefited from. There may well be others in the future, but as I say, that will be for the Council to determine.
Councillor Flitter, question?
Yes, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything at this point, but some clarification really from Paul, because there's been a question raised about voting rights. It was my understanding, and I may have got it wrong, but it was my understanding that you would only not get a vote if you were discussing an issue that, say if you delegated a function and there's a particular topic and you hadn't delegated functions to that, then you would not get a vote, but you would get a vote on other issues that didn't directly affect that. Do you see where I'm coming from? And I think there's a bit of misunderstanding there, because it's not that we wouldn't get a vote anywhere along the line. We would get a vote on those issues where it was concerning a particular subject.
Yeah, if I can refer members to Appendix 2 and paragraph 4.3, that sets out the circumstances, and the final sentence does state there, no authority will be entitled to vote on a matter to which they have not formally delegated to the SLB. So, as I say, the functions that we have delegated under the existing structures will continue to be delegated, unless Council should deem otherwise. And in that case, Derbyshire Dales would have a vote on those matters.
Thank you, Councillors. Obviously, you have a question?
It was the same as Councillor Flitter's, and it's sort of been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor G.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to make a general statement and a question to Paul, because I've always been in favour of this devolution aspect, because I think the point of it is to bring more strength and power to the whole East Midlands region and Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. And one of the sort of barriers against it is the sort of squabbling among smaller councils. So what we want in the future, and this is why devolution hasn't worked up to now in the United Kingdom, is that we need to give more power to our area. And, you know, we need to sit back and let the inward investment come into us And, you know, the vote we're going to get is in May when we vote for a new mayor. But the point is that devolution is good for Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. I remember speaking to Lewis Rose several years ago, and he was in favour of it. Well, I was on Amber Valley Borough Council. I was in favour of it completely, and I think we've always been standoffish, but I think it's going to be good for the whole region. And it's going to be good for all the young people growing up now, because they're going to have more money coming into this area, and we need to be positive about it.
Have you got a question there, Councillor G? No. All right. Thank you. If there are no more questions, can we move into... we've got, actually, before we move into debate, we've got 8 recommendations on here, which I presume you've all read, and some we've discussed now. So does anybody wish to move the recommendations as listed? Councillor Dobbs?
I'm happy to move them, and I'll speak if I can find a seconder.
Can I just raise an issue that part of it was to identify a substitute, a deputy. Does anybody wish to nominate anybody to do that? Councillor Flitter?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Peter Slack.
Is that seconded, please? Councillor Buttle? Yeah. So we've approved the 8 recommendations. Well, we've got the recommendations for, moved and seconded with the implementation of Councillor Slack as the deputy. We'll move into debate. So does anybody wish to ask any further questions or even debate the matter? Thank you. Councillor Dobbs?
Chair, if I can introduce it since I moved it. I think whatever our thoughts about the East Midlands Combined County Authority, it seems that this is the hand that we've been dealt, and I don't think it would be in our residents' interests if we refuse to engage. So taking that as a starting point, clearly 6 of these items are just for noting. We're not going to be able to influence them, and we've got 2 other bits that we have to approve. It makes perfect sense to me if these 2 bodies are merged into one, the Joint Economic Prosperity and the Vision Derbyshire Joint Committee. It does seem to make perfect sense. And clearly, if we want anybody to be representing us, albeit indirectly, on the in East Midlands Combined County Authority, we'll need this group of people to do the electing. So I think that this has been thought through to some extent. I'm advised that a lot of the stuff is going to show some evolution in terms of the terms of reference, but this is a suitable starting point, and I certainly commend our leader, Steve Litter, and his substitute, Peter Slack, to be the representatives on the D2SLB, as we'll hopefully all call it in the future, and I would like to move this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Buttle.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a curious one, this, because are we putting forward named people to be our representatives, or are we putting forward people who hold an internal title, like leader of the Liberal Democrats or leader of Labour? Or is it a deputy leader we're putting through? I'm quite curious to what happens if one of our leaders decides to stand down. Do they stay as our representative? Are they stuck at in that job forever? I'm just curious to know how we're actually going to run this. Obviously, I'm not in it to win it or anything, so I'm just curious to see how it goes.
So we move from questions, but we'll get some clarity from Mr. Wilson. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Once agreed, this matter would be considered at the annual meeting whereby we appoint to outside bodies.
Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered where we were going with that question. I did consult with Councillor Buttle and Councillor Slack.
Microphone, can you, sorry to interrupt you, microphone.
Yeah, that's unusual, you can't hear me. Yeah, I wondered where we were going with that, because I did consult Councillor Buttle on this issue, because there was some talk about whether it's leader of the council or whether it should be my deputy as a Liberal Democrat to take to that meeting. And it was the deputy leader of the council. And since there's two of them, I did consult, and it was agreed that Councillor Slack was to be the nomination. I'd just like to say that not participating in this, no matter how we feel, is really not an option. I have concerns, as other members have concerns, about the decision making, the political relationships, the speed of changes, what changes can be made by the incoming mayor. All these proposals we just don't know anything about yet, and we don't know how they'll change. And you've seen the terms of reference. Well, they could change 3 times over the next few weeks as things progress. But page 51, the report gives 5 strong guidelines around leadership, accountability, governance, flexibility, consensus decision making. And that's important. The detail is definitely coming at a later stage. But just to answer a question that Councillor Hughes asked earlier on about the flooding and sewerage, I would have taken that to be part of the planning and housing structure. And if it isn't, we'll certainly make representation that that is included. And there's a wide range. I mean, you've just got the names of the topics of where we're going with the working groups, but we don't know the detail yet. That's not being worked out, and that's where we shall want some real input. And I have to be honest that this is a new baby to everybody. We shall need some support. I shall hopefully be building a small team around me so that we can get our representation made across. And I see that our consultation with DULUC is still as strong now as it will be, because it won't affect us making our direct implications and communications. We shall still have that rail of thought running straight through. But on major functions, it is known that if you get a stronger team together, then you get better and more influence to decisions making at a higher level. 9 out of 10 times they turn around and say thank you very much and do no more about it. I'm hoping that this organisation will now have teeth, and like Councillor G has said, I'm very sceptical, but I'm hoping that it is right, that it will bring benefit to the Derbyshire Dales. And that is the main thing. First and foremost, it's Derbyshire Dales. Derbyshire is second. We've got to fight our own corner. We've got to make sure we get our representation, and we've got to put our policies through. And that can be done by working together as a council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Flitter, I'm somewhat sceptical about regional development organisations. I've lived through, this is the 3rd iteration of the East Midlands Regional Development Board, as it was in the 1980s perhaps, and then we get D2N2, and now we've got a mayoral authority. I feel that the first 2 are complete failures. I hope the mayoral authority is more successful and perhaps emulates what's happening in Manchester and Birmingham and London, which do seem to be very successful at getting further funds from government, unlike the regional development agencies and their successors, which were very poor at that and were riddled with corruption. So I hope that the decision, as Councillor Flitter says, the decision making in the mayoral authority is more transparent than happened in those organisations which weren't democratically founded, but were really bureaucracies that were self-sustaining and didn't really provide much benefit to the regions for which they were supposed to support. I would recognise that whatever mayoral authority we have, it depends on national funding, and we in the East Midlands, like other areas of the country outside the South East and London, fail when it comes to funding from infrastructure from central government. HS2 is a disaster. There was a programme on the BBC yesterday about the investment in rail, freight transport by rail that was going to make use of the existing rail infrastructure once the Western link on HS2 had been developed. Billions of private sector funding has gone into developing terminals for that, for moving freight on the west side of the country, and now that is at risk because of the failure of this government to continue to invest in HS2. So can we, if you look at the Financial Times has an article called The Big Read on Birmingham, and in that article it shows that if you look at GDP per capita, GDP per worker in different cities in the UK, London is 30%, GDP per worker is 30% higher than the national average. Manchester is about 8% lower, but Birmingham, Liverpool and Leeds are worse than that. Fortunately, we live in a near to a great city, Derby, and that august body, the Daily Mail, reported this week that Derby is one of the few cities in the UK which shows that the household incomes have actually risen since 2010. And I hope that, I believe that is probably the contribution of the aerospace industry around Derby. This is another high-tech industry around Derby that has allowed us that to happen. And I think through this through this mayoral authority, we can leverage what is happening in Derby and what happens in Nottingham to our benefit if we play our cards right. So in that respect, I do fully support what we're doing now, and I will be voting for this particular board. But I do feel that we are reliant on national government, and I'm looking forward to a change in national government that will provide better funding for areas outside the southeast of England and London, where basically it's the finance sector that has benefited and every other sector has fallen behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I go a little bit further than being sceptical about this proposal. But first I want to say that Paul Wilson assures us that we shouldn't worry too much about functions. But I look at the 3, 6, 7 areas which this new board is going to cover: economic growth, employment and skills, health and communities, public service reform, transport, climate change, planning and housing. Now they're quite specific to me. And what it says is we've got 7 talking shops going to be established, and we're expected to be part of those, but unless we delegate any functions, we will have no voting rights. So we could be part of a group talking about planning and housing, which is of interest to us, but unless we delegate planning and housing, we have no right to vote on the outcome. And I also think there won't be a single other authority who will delegate anything about planning and housing, and therefore there would be a group with none of whom members have any voting rights. So I think from a practical point of view, much of this is just going to be a talking shop which won't constitutionally be able to achieve anything. But why am I more than sceptical? First of all, because we've got a new organisation which is totally democratically unaccountable to anyone. And democratic accountability is a cornerstone of what I think we're all about. I think it's an absurd step into the future where we move from an administration which is dedicated to openness and accountability to one into opaqueness. Now, I would also point out that this proposal seems to me to show a complete lack of trust in the new mayoral combined authority. Now, at the very least, we have the opportunity to elect elect a mayor, and that mayor is accountable to the citizens of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. This strategic leadership board is accountable to no one. I was looking forward as a constituent or whatever it is, associate member of the Mayoral Combined Authority, to working with authorities across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. And that would mean working in partnership with authorities in Nottinghamshire who share similar concerns to us. What I find is now we're establishing a block, a Derbyshire block, and no doubt Nottinghamshire will establish a Nottinghamshire block. So rather than us have a relationship with the Mayoral Combined Authority where we work collectively across Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, we're not. We've got a single Derbyshire block. And I agree with the point Councillor Hughes made earlier. This is a layer of administrative bureaucracy which prevents us from having our engagement with the Mayoral Combined Authority. And I just don't think that reflects what the expectation was from this council, and I'm sure many other councils, when they agreed to participate with the Mayoral Combined Authority. So I simply see no benefit whatsoever, and a lot of disbenefits when we want to have discussions and negotiations with the new mayor and the new mayor Combined Authority. We're not allowed to. We have to work through this new Derbyshire block rather than participating directly. I would have thought, to be honest, that the Mayoral Combined Authority and the new mayor, she is going to want to set up a series of arrangements very similar to those which are being proposed here. This is exactly the model that the new Mayoral Combined Authority is going to want to set up. So we're now going to have, we're likely to have three sets of a Nottinghamshire, a Derbyshire, and a Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire set of arrangements, which are all going to duplicate each other, and we'll be falling over ourselves. So, of course, we should have a seat at this board, but I think it's an absolutely absurd animal to recreate.
Thank you. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Councillor Hughes and Councillor O'Brien on many of the issues they raised. It's very undemocratic, really, it's taking democracy away from the people, but away from the voters, having a mayor controlling that much in a combined authority. But saying all that, I agree with what they've said, but we are where we are, and we have to accept where we are, and we have to do the best where we are. So I think probably a prospective new government coming in has promised that more funds will come from central government, from the centre, which Councillor Hughes has referred to as a great big and massive amount of wealth in London. Some of that wealth will be distributed out through the country into areas into combined authority areas. So there might be a little glimmer of hope for an improvement in those areas. And as Councillor G has already said, investment in those areas probably will increase, and hopefully will increase. So there is a glimmer of hope, but democracy is being eroded here, and it's not good. It's not good at all. We are a democratic system, and we should remain a democratic system. But again, we are where we are, and we have to work with what we've got. So and do the best. Manchester's managed to do the best, and other cities. So when the money does flow out from government, which the new government, prospective government, will do, we will get probably more money and get more achievements and more wealth for our areas. So we've got to try and do our very best in the circumstances we find ourselves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Slack. Well, I think that's the end of the debate. I can't see nobody else on my list. So it's been moved and it's been seconded that we note and approve the 8 recommendations with the addition of Councillor Slack acting as the deputy. Can I have all those in favour of approval, please? Raise your hands. You got everybody? Against, please. That's not. And abstentions, please. Right. I calculate that motion is therefore carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the structural changes of the organisation and establishment. Again, it's Mr Wilson who's going to lead us through this one. Thank you, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As Head of Paid Service, it is my responsibility to inform Council of the staffing resources required to discharge the functions of the authority, and it's also my responsibility to reflect upon the ambitions of the Council and advise whether we have the necessary resources in place to deliver on those collective ambitions. If I may refer members back to the work that the Council commissioned and were briefed on in September 23 from Circling Squares, that looked at a comprehensive package of measures in order to address many of the issues that we have in terms of resource allocation, prioritisation and corporate capacity. And they are laid out in paragraph 1.3 of the report. One of the key recommendations that came from the Circling Squares work was that the organisation lacks strategic capacity. And members may recall one of the recommendations was that that needed to be addressed in order to ensure that the Council was best placed to deliver on the ambitions, and the recommendation was that that could be addressed by the creation of a post of Strategic Director. Members will recall this is an issue I've revisited on a number of occasions, and whilst there is still a cogent case for that type of position, I'm very mindful of the financial challenges that this authority faces over the next 12 to 18 months, and therefore don't feel able to put that forward for consideration at this moment in time. But I don't want members to lose sight of that issue, because it does have an impact on our corporate ability to deliver on many of the things that members want us to move forward with. In considering the findings of the Circling Squares report, an opportunity has clearly presented itself through the retirement of the Director of Regulatory Services from the 1st of April, and in that regard, alongside CLT colleagues and members of that particular department, I have engaged extensively on proposals for looking at how the Council's functions can be better realigned to deliver the new ambitions of the corporate plan, and how we can actually try and ensure that there is better alignment, not just within a department, but also across the organisation as a whole. Clearly, one of the main aims of the corporate plan, which members approved in December, was very much emphasising the need to build flourishing, sustainable communities, a very strong focus on place and business and housing policies and economic development plans, and clearly that aligns very well to the place-shaping agenda that the Council is setting. The proposals I've outlined in the report, 2.4, is to effectively merge two departments into one. So the proposal is to disestablish, upon the retirement of the current Director of Regulatory Services, that particular department, but also the Department of Policy and Regeneration. They would be merged together, and I'm proposing that we would create a new Directorate of Place and Economy. Within that, we would actually look to take some of the functions from the existing department. Principally, we would look to merge the development management functions back with planning policy, economic development and regeneration. That would enable the Council to very much ensure that there is much closer alignment with that place agenda in terms of building sustainable development, sustainable communities and alike. However, in moving that particular function, there are a number of functions which in themselves do not justify the retention of a separate department. They're listed at 2.5 of the report, and members can see within that section the proposed amendments that I'm suggesting in terms of where those functions should sit moving forward. In terms of other capacity issues, the retirement of a director does clearly release some resources within the authority, and I'm proposing that we retain those in order to address some of the acknowledged capacity weaknesses that currently exist. There are a number of areas which the Council does need to focus upon. These are outlined within the subsections of the report. If I can take the first one in terms of corporate performance and project delivery. Again, this was an area highlighted by Circling Squares as needing further resource and capacity in order to deliver on the corporate projects and ensure that there is closer alignment. And paragraph 2.9 sets out the type of areas that resource would be utilised for. I haven't put forward a clear proposal on this issue because I do want to discuss this further with CLT colleagues to get their ideas in terms of how that particular issue may be addressed. We clearly have skill sets within the organisation at the moment, and there may well be a strong case to actually align some of those into this particular area, supplemented as necessary. The second area is corporate health and safety. I think it's fair to say that the current Director of Regulatory Services has played a very significant role in corporate health and safety in terms of coordination of our functions and our legal responsibilities. Once that post holder retires from the Council, that knowledge does not exist anywhere else in the organisation. Clearly, we have a legal responsibility to make sure that we operate within the health and safety legislation, and I have made approaches to other Derbyshire authorities in this regard, and there's a very strong expression of interest that I've received from Bolsover and North East Derbyshire councils, who have a dedicated team who are very well regarded in the county in this particular area, and we have already established and made arrangements to meet with them to discuss a potential shared service arrangement on that particular issue. Development management is the third area. Clearly, development management is a very high-profile service. The council delivers. It's a service which is under significant pressure at the moment. It's also a service where we are carrying a number of vacancies which are proving extremely challenging to recruit to. That is reflective of a national shortage of qualified planners, and particularly does refer back to many of the issues I brought to members' attention back in September regarding terms and conditions, salary scales and so on and so forth. However, notwithstanding, there is an opportunity to look at that with the potential merger into the new Place Directorate, and we're proposing to make some changes which are outlined at 2.17 of the report. I do want to draw members' attention to the fact that clearly there is an ambition from the Progressive Alliance to improve performance on planning, but also improve performance on planning enforcement. So part of these recommendations does look to increase marginally planning enforcement resources, but more significantly to create a dedicated planning enforcement team leader. That's not a post we've previously had, and I feel that with that level of expertise we'll be able to deliver on the Alliance's ambition in that particular regard. The costs of these proposals are outlined in the following sections of the report. I do make reference to the fact that there has been a national increase in planning fees which came into effect at the beginning of December. There's a very strong indication from government that they expect those monies to be utilised to support planning services. That is effectively what this report seeks to address. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien, you were first. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, Paul. You referred in your report there to the vacant post. I think it's corporate director, is it? You have? I can't remember the precise total, but the reference to the vacant corporate post. First question is, can you confirm that funding for that post remains in place within the revenue budget? Now, my second question relates to the clear recommendation in the Circling Squares report, which I think we all endorsed as members, that there is an urgent need to reinforce the strategic capacity within the authority at corporate level, because there was, shall we say, often confusion at current management level between strategic and delivery issues. Can you tell me that you're certain that by merging two current services and two services into one with a single director who retains responsibility for the service delivery of those two combined services, whether that is going to result in any increase in strategic capacity in the organisation?
Thank you, Chair. If I can take the first point. The post of corporate director is still retained on the establishment structure, but there has been no revenue budget provision against that post since I think it was 2019. that was taken out, and members previously been appraised of that fact. So were that post to be appointed to, it would require additional revenue provision to be made by the council, hence the reason why it's not something I'm comfortable with putting forward at the present time. In terms of the merging of the directorates and the director responsibilities, in short, the answer is no. This proposal creates no additional strategic capacity, and that is a shortcoming which will continue within the authority. The key issue is that one of the main areas identified through the Circling Squares work is that the directors are not, they do not have the freedom to operate in a strategic way because they are too regularly being dragged into service delivery issues. There are too many operational requirements placed upon service directors. Some of that might well come from the organisation itself. A lot of that also comes from external factors. And members clearly have a role in helping us deal with that moving forward, and that's something that I do wish to address. But no strategic capacity will be created by this. This is very much trying to better align services, make some investment in some critical areas we've got at the moment, and leave the door open for us to come back with further proposals as and when resources permit to look at the bigger issues which will still exist.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, questions please, or question?
Thank you. There's only one. But I would like to voice my appreciation for the way in which Paul, you're increasing the enforcement teams to a full-time enforcement officer leading that team, and also the opportunity for staff from planning officers to move between planning policy work, developing local plan, and also doing planning, responding to planning applications. My question is will it be possible for individual officers on a temporary basis or a permanent basis to move between these two different roles, the planning policy role and the planning officer role done in development management?
Through you, Chair, that would be the ideal scenario, because I think that develops a much broader skill set. Yeah. Clearly, it's very much influenced by pressures of work and having a full staffing establishment, which we haven't got at the moment. But in an ideal world, that will be facilitated by this structure, which is not facilitated by the current structure.
And I think also it will give opportunities that might not be elsewhere as well. So it will improve the attractiveness of this post and lead to better skill development for individuals. So I think this is an excellent idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckler.
Yes, my question is about some of the environment stuff that Tim Braun led on. One of the things that we said during the last council was we had a focus through the climate change working group, for example, on how we operate as a council. And one of the things that we've looked at, that we've been looking at as an alliance, is to ensure that the environment is embedded throughout all of the work that we do, and the team that the climate change, the area that the climate change has been moved into is very much an operational team, and quite a lot of the work that we want the climate change team to work on is on how is working across the district, which doesn't really sit within that team. That sits within the place team, and this is also the case with the enhanced nature duty that we've got as a council. That quite a lot of the things that we're looking at in terms of things like the local plan, so where we're talking about green infrastructure, for example, and biodiversity net gain, that should all be within the place directorate, whereas how we manage our land will sit within the clean, the directorate that Ash will be leading on. And I understand that these are two different things. If there's, where is the strategic direction on that going to sit? Because at the moment, the strategic direction for that, because that's in two different directorates, sits with Paul. So the question about that is, what has been the consideration of how these things, which are looking at what we're doing for the district as a whole and what we're doing as a council, have they been considered, and how are they being considered?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That is a very fair point, or points that have been made there, and I have to be honest, I did think long and hard about this issue, and just to try and explain the rationale behind my proposal. First of all, climate change influences every single activity that this council undertakes, so it could literally sit anywhere within the organisation and it would still have an involvement in areas of activity outside of where it was sitting. I think the second point is that the work that our climate change officer has been doing of late and is likely to be doing in the very near future is very closely aligned to our estates work. And speaking to the individual team members, there was a very strong wish on their part that they were reporting within the same directorate, that we didn't break up that link between climate change and estates and facilities. That's not to say that climate change will not broaden in the future. It clearly will, and it will get engaged in other areas. But for the purposes of line management reporting, that really is the main function of putting it on this structure diagram. If you was to speak to Jo Hill, she would tell you that every single day of the week she's working across this organisation, up and down this organisation, outside the organisation. But just for line management reporting purposes, because they have to report somewhere, then there is a stronger alignment at the present time with community and environmental services than anywhere else. But that may well change, and if it changes, we can reflect that.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
I was going to effectively ask the same question as Councillor Buckler, so I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ripton?
I was also going to ask a similar question, but I think it is worth labouring the point. Given the importance of climate change, the optics of it sort of sitting in a service delivery function don't sit well with me, and I think we're only going to solve climate by taking a strategic approach to how we use land and how we plan our economy. So I would ask that perhaps we look again at that, not least because I think it sends the wrong message.
Well,
without wishing to put him on the spot, I don't know whether Ash would wish to make any comments in terms of the work undertaken in his department and the cross-linkages that do exist.
Thank you, Chair. I think the fair points that are raised by members, what I would say is, whilst there are a number of service areas within the department that do actual operational delivery, there's also a strategic aspect to a number of those services, and I don't want that to be overlooked by members. The senior managers within that team do play a strategic role. They just have to have one foot in operational services, or at least a stronger awareness of operational services. So, not wishing to correct members, I really don't want to overlook that, because I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that those senior managers do undertake a strategic role. They also work very, very closely with Mike and the team. And if you look at the work programme that Jo has had since she's been with us, or since the role has been formed, Jo has either helped inform decisions within the services in the department, or my team have helped inform Jo. And there are some natural synergies there. I actually think that it strengthens what we do. It does provide an additional layer of strategic support, and I certainly would welcome that. And that's my view. That's the view that I offered to CLT. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn in saying that CLT also feel the same way.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Councillor G.
Yeah, I think I'm positive about this changes to the organisational establishment, but you know, one of the main challenges we've got in our corporate plan is housing provision, you know, meeting our housing needs. So I hope that I gathered that these sort of changes will put more boots on the ground in the planning department, so we can actually make sure that over the next 5, 10, 15 years, these houses are going to be delivered to meet our housing needs. So we need people who are actually dealing with the planning applications. So I think that is really important. And if you could just make me happy about that, please.
Mr Wilson, can you make Councillor G happy, please?
I'll certainly try, Chair. Absolutely. In terms of strengthening that role between planning policy and delivery in terms of the planning process, yes, the expectation is that we will have more resource. But you know, I really do need to emphasise it is really, really difficult to recruit planning staff at the moment. And one of the challenges that we will have is how competitive we can be when other authorities in Derbyshire are all fishing in the very small pond that exists. The principal planner post, we've advertised it 3 times now, at what is a competitive salary, because we have done the benchmarking across other Derbyshire authorities, but you also need to bear in mind that people go to the private sector as well. Now, we're seeing it in planning at the moment, we have seen it in other areas in the past, and I do come back to my point back in September. The organisation does need to be mindful of the difficulties of recruitment and retention. And we are embarking upon a programme of work to look at that in detail. And when that does come forward to members, I would encourage you to support some of the measures that do come forward, because that will help us address this type of issue.
Thank you very much. I've got no more people down on my list for questions. We're asking that we approve recommendation 1, which is just one recommendation. Do I have anybody that will move that, please? Councillor Flitter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will be brief because I think it's explanatory in the report. But this report's not just generated by circling squares, the retirement of officers, but also to manage the needs of this council and the expectations of members, which I'll come back to in a minute. But in 2.3 of the report, of our statement, we've got a policy that we want to build flourishing, sustainable communities. But the delivery of that aim will need officers and members to work closely together. It's regrettable that we are to lose 2 valuable members of this council, 2 officers of this council, one being a director who has great experience, and that is going to be a loss that we've got to really pick up on. But I see this report as stage 1. And stage 2, as I think Paul has indicated, I need to see really a stage where we look at service managers, and so we can make a point's been made that again people on the ground doing the operational work as service managers in areas of need where we want to concentrate on is important, so that we can relieve our officers to be that more strategic. And I think they're capable. We've just got to give them the opportunity. And that's where members can really take heed here, because one, we've got to take expectations of members seriously, but we can't do that unless we have a proper organisational way of operating. And by that I certainly mean that, you know, don't go to your main directors all the time for little bits of things, because a telephone call from a member might seem 2 minutes and they may seem very irrelevant. To an officer, that may lead to half a day of finding out that information you need, which at the moment is taking them away from the work they're actually doing. So, and the second point is the expectations of the members of the public, and planning enforcement was a big issue when we were on the doorstep nearly a year ago, and that is somewhere where we've got to master and cater for the future. I'm not going to go on and on. I think the report is valid. I would move this, Chair, because I think it's important that we move forward, and then we build on what we've got within that process.
Thank you. Councillor Burford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm more than happy to second the recommendations, and thank Paul for his excellent report and presentation to us this evening. I think we recall, those of us who attended the presentation last September from Circling Square as a consultants, we knew we'd have to lose a corporate director, shall we say, or director, I should say. And I think the retirement anticipated, but rather sad retirement in a way, of Tim Braun that has brought the organisation to a head, or the reorganisation to a head, I should say. And I think looking at the proposed structure, management structure, and hearing what Ash Watts has said to us a few minutes ago, I think there's no reason why the new structure shouldn't work, with obviously the directors of Place and Economy, that's a new one, and obviously Ash's responsibility as well being increased. I sympathise with that, with what they've got to take on, but I think it's inevitable really that had to happen. But I'm sure it can work together, and I appreciate what Ash has said about in estates and facilities and climate change, working together more closely with clean and green and so on. So I think that should work, but it's obviously going to be a challenge in the future, but it's going to save this authority some money, which can probably be spent in perhaps in development management, boosting that, although I appreciate the problems that the council's got in terms of recruiting planning staff, both to policy and to development planning. But I welcome the answer to Councillor Hughes' question about perhaps having more flexible appointments in planning between policy and development planning, and if that can come about, then that probably would be beneficial, I think, in terms of the two sub-strands working together more closely perhaps than may have been the case in the past. So I'm very pleased to second this proposal.
Thank you. So it's been moved and it's seconded. We can move into debate now, and the first on my list is Councillor O'Brien. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I will be happy to support the proposal, but it does come with some reservations, and I echo, I think, the sentiment of Councillor Flitter's helpful comments when he moved the recommendation. Our Chief Executive has come to us on several occasions over the past 4.5 years with a plea for more strategic capacity within the authority. And that was made very clear to us in the report we commissioned from Circling Squares, where we invested in that report from those consultants, which highlighted the principal flaw in our current governance is that lack of strategic capacity. And they said that when we have an opportunity to look at our corporate management team, when that opportunity arises, then that is the time we should look at how we can increase our strategic capacity. So I'm disappointed, I have to say, that it doesn't appear that we've taken that opportunity to do that on this occasion. I have to say, when I look at the new Place Directorate, as it's now called, that to me is a strategic function. It's an enormously wide range of responsibilities, and I think, to be honest, to expect an individual officer to have operational responsibility, which is what comes with this title, to have operational responsibility for all those services is just unrealistic. So I think that cries out for a strategic approach, and then, as Councillor Flitter says, you let individual service heads for a fair number of those responsibilities, you let the service delivery responsibility to posts further down the scale. So I think this is a missed opportunity, and I would urge our Chief Executive to not let this opportunity lie, and I hope he will continue to address this. And I think the debate we had on this new Derbyshire Leadership Board and the mayoral combined authority emphasises the need for us to be able to think and act strategically. You cannot do that if at the same time you're trying to deliver services on the ground. It doesn't happen, and that is why we've got ourselves into some of the dilemmas that we have over the past years. So as I said, I'm happy to support this recommendation because I support what our chief executive is trying to do. But I do think this is a missed opportunity. So I would urge all of us, the leadership and the political and the officer leadership, to return to this issue in the near future.
Thank you. The next on the list is Councillor Burton, please.
It's important for me to just convey a few comments. I sometimes feel overwhelmed and almost inadequate in this sort of debate, but first of all I want to say I totally support the comments from Councillor Flitter. Thank you, Steve, that was very helpful, and also earlier to the comments of Paul Wilson. I think for me, and I don't know about you, one of the problems as a ward member is this expectancy. And what I've seen in recent years is community has become more re-engaged and more proactive. I mean, recently we had an issue, as Susan Hobson knows about, in Darlingdale with the Hordale Woods. A public meeting is held. You know, some years ago you'd have been lucky if you'd have got half a dozen folk to a public meeting. There was over 100 people that night. And we're their elected representatives, and there is an expectancy that we can then do something via our officers. And the dilemma is that then when you pursue particular routes, unfortunately we don't seem to have that resource available. And this is no criticism of the current officers, because we are well served by the present planning officers, but they're totally, in my personal view, overwhelmed in many aspects in the expectancy and the demands, and particularly where last night at a town council meeting there were issues over a desire to actually see enforcement happen. So I really do hope that out of this, for the sake of those of us that stand to be part of this council, we can certainly have a framework that will serve us well in those duties that we're elected to be. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Settling Square's opened his eyes a bit on the workshops we have with those. I do think we needed to change. I think we need to be more proactive, and same as Councillor Burton just said, we need to be part of the community and be close to the community, and any issues come up, we need to be there and address it with the officers. One thing I do like especially about this is now certain areas you can go to, such as planning. You can ring a planning officer about, they ask you to ring them actually, about a planning application. But other areas you can't, you go straight through to the director. And I think by having a different telephone directory with all the green and clean team, the power parks, the all those areas, environmental health and different areas, all with telephone numbers where you can go directly to the person you want to talk to. And this has been a challenge for a few years because they are overwhelmed. The senior officer directors are overwhelmed with telephone calls and emails, and we've got to. They're more than capable. The second line officers are more than capable of handling most of the things, and if they aren't, they will refer it back to the directors. So I think this is a good, sensible move, which will increase the role of the district council in operation-wise. So yes, I will be supporting this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slack. I've nobody else for debate. Oh, Councillor Boothroyd, thank you.
I think I just want to make the point that while climate change sits in the Director of Community and Environmental Services, the opportunity to have an impact on climate change within those services that we operate is very, very, very limited. You know, there's a lot of things in there, but actually, and I think I want to labour that slightly because it does need urgent review as to how we then, as a Progressive Alliance led, it was previously a lot of the climate change activities were sitting in those functions, but that will make such a small difference in what we actually need to do for climate change. So I think we really need to consider as a group of members whether or not that's as ambitious as we can be with climate change, and that's why we see our activities sitting forevermore.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to talk, but I think Councillor Boothroyd has. I'd like to echo what she said. I think there's a real issue. I mean, I'm sure Ash can manage this. He's excellent at managing lots of other services, but it is part of place and economy. It has overall. We're moving out of the position where climate change officer is responsible for improving the performance of the council itself into improving the performance of our suppliers and improving the performance of the district. And therefore there's a significant place-making requirement associated with the climate officer. And so my own feeling is that it would be better placed under the Director of Place and Economy, where it would fit with economic development, tourism, conservation and design, which are broadly similar in scope, even if they're perhaps not as important as the climate change work that is done. So I would favour that it was moved to the place and economy part of the council, so that it could have a greater impact on placemaking across Derbyshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson just wants to come back and clarify something. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think members need to approach this from the point of view of how are the council's climate change ambitions going to be delivered? And they're not going to be delivered or dictated by where the climate change officer sits in the organisation. They're going to be delivered by the climate change action plans, by the biodiversity action plans we've got, by the joint working that takes place across the whole organisation, by the key projects that are already taking place in the housing field, in the place shaping arena. So where this post sits in the organisation isn't going to make one jot of difference, I would suggest, to what the impact that particular office is going to have within that service area. That's not just my view, that is actually the view of the officers as well. Now, members need to be very careful that I haven't just put this forward without giving it a lot of consideration. The climate change officer wants to stay with the estates and facilities functions. They have to sit within the Community and Environmental Services Directorate because that is the most logical place. That's where they do pretty much all of the work on our estate. So if you separate that function out just for the purpose of a structural diagram, you are likely to upset the very officer that you want to keep on board. I just make that point. I have discussed this at length, and if members feel at any point that the positioning of that post on this structure diagram is impacting on your ability to deliver, please let me know. But I will give you an assurance that it will not have one jot of a difference as to what Jo Hill does. She will still deliver on all of the agenda that you've set. She will just report to a director for line management purposes that happens to be Director of Community and Environmental Services.
Thank you. Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Paul. I know that I did discuss this with you previously, and I did ask that Jo wasn't necessarily bunkered in something that was working with our estates and facilities, and I wanted her out there working with our people, our residents, our communities. And while I accept there are plenty of things yet to do here in the council, I'd like you to think about maybe helping her to stretch her wings, get herself out there, start doing some stuff outside in the community rather than just putting bits and bobs on our roof. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buttle. Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to say I really like the proposal. I think it's dynamic, it's agile. We criticise organisations all the time for being far too top heavy, and actually we're taking some proactive steps in the circumstances that we have to adjust our structure and save a bit of money. So that sounds really good. From the environmental point of view, I've always seen this, and since all the discussions we've had since I've been elected, we want to see this as a golden thread through everything the council does. So I absolutely agree with Paul. It makes no difference where this role sits. In fact, I think it sits in the right place in this structure. every member of the council, whether elected or officers, should be having climate change, climate sort of considerations in every part of their role. So, well done, Paul. Excellent.
Thank you. I have no further people down for debate. It's been moved, it's been seconded. It's moved by Councillor Flitter, seconded by Councillor Burford. It's for recommendation that for one approval. Can I have all those in favour, please? Against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous and that's carried. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 10, which is the local council tax support scheme. And Karen's going to present this one for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report's asking members to approve and adopt a local council tax support scheme for 24-25 and to approve a budget of £20,000 for the discretionary hardship scheme for that year. So the local council tax support scheme gives households that are eligible a reduction of 91.5% on their council tax bills. We calculate those reductions after other discounts have been applied, such as single person occupancy. And in line with government guidance, there are separate entitlement provisions for working age households and for pensioners. Pensioners get the 100% reduction, but as I've said earlier, working age claimants receive 91.5% reduction. And in our area, where we've got about 34,500 households, around 3,100, that's about 9%, currently receive council tax support. The anticipated cost of the proposed scheme, as the report says, will be around £3.7 million, split £1.7 million in respect of pension age claimants, with the rest being for working age payments. In terms of cost, the cost of the scheme is shared with other major preceptors, meaning that the county council actually bears about 70% of the cost, and we take about 14%, with police and fire making up the rest. In this report, the proposed scheme for 24-25 is essentially the same as the scheme for the current year. The only changes that we're proposing to make are to update certain allowances within the scheme in accordance with the circulars from the Department for Work and Pensions and with regulations. So there's no major changes to the scheme, and therefore there was no need to consult with the public or with the precepting authorities. In terms of the discretionary hardship scheme, some council taxpayers, even after the 91.5% reduction, still struggle to pay the remaining amount of the council tax bill. And so the discretionary hardship scheme is set up so that the benefits manager can use his authority to award an amount from the discretionary hardship fund, meaning that in most cases the bills are reduced to zero. In the past and in the current year, we've got a budget of £20,000 for that fund, and at the moment the benefits manager feels that that will be sufficient for 24-25 as well. If monitoring during the year proves that that's not enough, then, as I've said at previous council meetings, I'll bring a report back to request additional funding. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Karen. Has anybody got any questions on this one? It looks quite straightforward to me. No questions? So we've got two recommendations to approve 1 and 2, and as Karen has mentioned, have we got anybody who wants to move it? Councillor Shelley?
Yes, please. Yes, I'd like to. I think it's an excellent report, and I fully support the recommendations and the intent.
Thank you. Councillor Buttle? Right, we've got it moved and seconded. Anybody want to speak in debate? Councillor G and then Councillor Hobson, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to support this recommendation, and I think this is a really important function of the council. I've come across this in about 12 years of being on a council, and I think it's something that any of us in this room could fall on hard times, and I think we need to support those people, so I'm happy to support it.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you. Just briefly, Chair, through you to thank Karen. It actually says in paragraph 1.4 that you know, our council has not been challenged at a tribunal or judicial review, so that's thanks to Karen and the team. Thank you.
Thank you both for those comments. Anybody else wish to say anything in debate, please? No? Right, so it's been moved, it's been seconded. Can I have those in favour for the recommendations? Please vote. It's looking fairly unanimous, but can we just have anybody against? Sorry, against? And abstentions, please. So that's carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 11, which is the review of the polling districts. And Jason Spencer is going to lead us through this one. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Chair. I've not got a lot to add to the report that members have already got in front of them. The main purpose of this report tonight is two reasons. The first one is to inform you that we are carrying out a review of our polling districts and polling places. This is required by statute. It's in legislation. The relevant legislation, as I've highlighted in the report, was introduced before the Fixed Term Parliament Act was repealed. So the timetable of carrying out the review was around the basis that we would have a fixed term for Parliament. Because that's now been repealed, the timescales for a review no longer fit in with the parliamentary election timetable, but we are still required to carry on with the review. So the council is required to complete the review by January 2025, but we are formally going to start it now. We have already done some preliminary work in December. But the one thing I would mention in terms of polling places, that in the Elections Act that was 22, a new duty was placed upon the returning officer to make sure that polling stations are fully accessible. So as a consequence, the council does regularly keep under review the buildings we use for polling stations and how electors move around those polling stations. So, for example, after every election, we do send out a questionnaire to the presiding officers at the polling station. We have polling station inspectors who go out there on the ground on polling day, and they feedback with observations. So we do keep it continual under review. So in some respects, a lot of the work involved in the review we have already done, which leads me on to the second part of the report, which is the items in paragraph 211. They are items that we have identified in recent elections that we think require an alteration to the polling stations that are, or the polling places that are used for particular polling stations. And they've arisen for a combination of reasons. Some of them are because the building that we have previously used is no longer available, or we have been made aware of an alternative venue in the same area that is better suited as a polling station. And there are some polling stations where the current layout of the building means that it's no longer suitable for a polling station, so we've actively looked out for alternative venues, and the cases where that have applied are set out in paragraph 211. The thing here is that the report proposes that we make those changes now, so that any election or elections that take place between now and completion of the review will the polling stations used will be at those locations. It may well be, as a result of the review, that we find there are additional issues that we're not aware of, and then we would be bringing back proposals to members in order to address those issues. So those are the two elements of this report. I thought it'd be useful just to highlight the purpose of the recommendations that are there before you. The first one is to note that we are carrying out this review and that we're commencing it. So we will, as part of the review, be making contact with parish councillors, with others who've been involved in the electoral process, election agents, just to see if they've got any feedback on stations whilst they've got. There is an outline timetable there. It's just to highlight that the timetable is really, it's there because it's realistic in what we think we can achieve within those timescales. So we still want to complete it well in time for the January 2025 deadline, but we do have various stages where decisions need to be made by members, and that in some respects influences the timetable. So it's to note that timetable for review. The third recommendation is about in some respects this is not, in my opinion, a significant issue, but it's giving delegation to the electoral registration officer to implement any measures that are necessary to give effect to the new parliamentary constituencies. In terms of the Derbyshire Dales as a district, the parliamentary changes have not had any impact at all. So effectively the whole of the Derbyshire Dales is still in the Derbyshire Dales parliamentary constituency. There are some changes that we, as the agent of the returning officer and the acting returning officer, will have to deal with in terms of bringing in the areas in Amber Valley and South Derbyshire, but we're working through those. But the main decision making here is about the ERO for Derbyshire Dales. It is very unlikely that we will need to use this delegation because, as I said, there are no significant changes. But what we have found when we reviewed the boundaries for the district for the elections last year, that there were some anomalies. So, for example, we found a situation where some electors in a very small polling district were actually travelling past another polling station in order to get to the one that was designated to them. So we actually made a slight tweak so that electors from that polling district were allocated a different polling station. So it might be those kind of very small things that will pick up. I don't anticipate anything significant. The fourth recommendation is to authorise the electoral officer to take the necessary measures to give effect to any new amended polling districts on completion of the district review. Again, I don't see any significant changes there. Most of the polling districts in the Derbyshire Dales, because we are fully parished, are coterminous with parish boundaries, so it's unlikely that we would change that. So again, I don't think there will be any significant changes. It may well be that the only change is about changing the name of polling districts. So you'll be familiar from electoral registers that a lot of the elector numbers start with 3 letters, and that is the name of their polling district. We may tweak some of the letters that are used in the naming of the polling district so that all the same letters, all the same polling districts within the particular council ward start with the same letter, because they don't at the moment. So that's the kind of tweaking we're talking about, nothing particularly significant. And then item 5 is seeking approval for delegation to Governance and Resources Committee to deal with reports like this rather than full council. It fits within the current terms of reference of the Governance and Resources Subcommittee, but we need to demonstrate that we've specifically delegated the authority under sections 18 and 18A of the representations of the people. So that's what we're seeking there in recommendation 5. And recommendation 6 is seeking the power to designate polling places to the Director of Corporate and Customer Services. Again, this is only in would really only be used in emergency circumstances, where in the run up to an election, when we're about to issue poll cards, or post poll card issue, where we need to alter a polling place because one suddenly becomes unavailable. That those are the circumstances we'd use that delegation, and it would normally be with consultation with the relevant chair and with ward members. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thanks for that very thorough report. Thank you. Any questions, please? Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Jason, for your report. Would it go into governance and resources? I'm just concerned that members, they need to tell their town and parish councils that you're confident that everybody will know about these changes well in advance if it does in future be voted to go through to governance and resources.
Yeah, I mean, we do work closely with the parish councils, so if there were any changes, we would communicate those changes to the parish councils ourselves. Yeah,
you know, we've got a bit of history with this.
Yes,
Jason,
I could also make a commitment to contact the relevant ward members if the Governance and Resources Committee have made a decision that affects their ward.
That would be lovely,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions, please? So we've got 6 recommendations. 1 and 2 are to note the recommendations. 3 and 4 are to authorise, and the others are to delegate. Does that find anybody that wishes to move it? Councillor Boothroyd?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Burford, you're seconding? Thank you. Right, we'll enter into debate. Has anybody got any... Councillor Burford, you wish to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a very complicated issue, and I do thank Jason Spencer and his colleagues, Chris Bond and other colleagues, for the work that they've done. It's really quite challenging, really, this sort of work. And of course, we don't hear from the elections team normally between elections. It's just in the run-up to each election, then we hear from them quite a lot. But they're working very hard in the background, and it has really been challenging recently because of the probably the... well, it's difficult to accuse the Boundary Commission of dirty dealing, if you like, but it certainly looked like that in many cases where, particularly during the pandemic, they came up with some very strange proposals for ward boundary changes, and which is why there's such a problem, as all Matlock area and Darley-Dale area members know, in this area. It's been quite a dog's breakfast to actually deal with in terms of representing different areas of your ward, some on in your new or expanded district council ward, but in the existing county council division, and then some parishes are not happy, obviously, with the changes that they're experiencing as well. So it's good to know that I've spoken to Jason Spencer about this several times. In fact, I think myself and probably Councillor Dobbs in the past have frequently emailed and made representations to the Boundaries Commission about some of these proposals. So I certainly welcome the work that they've done, but I think most people, particularly parish councils who don't necessarily get involved in debates about these things, they hear about it because they've been written to, and they're confused about the boundary changes. They're very inconsistent, and there are discrepancies which I think need to be ironed out. I think some of them will be, in talking to Jason Spencer, I think some of them will be ironed out at some stage. But at the moment, they don't really make a great deal of sense in some areas. I would criticise the government's repealing of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which makes it in a way more difficult for Jason and his colleagues in terms of the constituency boundary changes. Because I think taking over, it was one thing taking over with the areas of very close proximity to Derbyshire Dales, i.e. the Old Ports and southwest parishes wards of Amber Valley, but South Derbyshire is probably a step too far in a way. I mean, when we're in the north or the central part of the district, we don't know much about South Derbyshire, to be honest, so it's going to take some getting used to, but and whether they'll get used to joining Derbyshire Dales, it's going to be confusing for their residents when they're in South Derbyshire, but then in Derbyshire Dales for parliamentary constituency purposes. So a lot of rather unfortunate
issues that the people have got to grasp, I think, in the future. But I think I've got immense faith in Jason and his colleagues in terms of trying to sort this out and making it clearer and trying to get around some of the discrepancies that have occurred in recent years. So I welcome this report and move the recommendations. Oh, second, sorry, the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Burford. Has anybody else got anything to say in debate? Councillor G.
Just one quick one. I'd like to thank Jason for enlightening me on the Representation of the People Act of 1983, because it wasn't at the forefront of my mind at that time. But I think we should just go to the vote, please.
It was neither at the forefront of mine until I read it, I can guarantee you that. So, has anybody else wish to say anything? If not, it's been moved, it's been seconded. Can we have all those in favour, please? Against? Abstentions?
Just because I've declared that interest.
Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to item 12, which is a referred item from the Community and Environment Committee. Remember it well. And this is to consider the recommendations of the Community and Environment Committee regarding the approval of supplementary budget estimate, an estimate of £10,000 to facilitate a 12-month subscription to EarthSense. I don't think we've got anybody from that's going to be able. Councillor Burford, are you able to enlighten us in relation to this as Chair of the Community and Environment? Please.
Well, only in terms of the fact that we did support the procuring of this EarthSense monitor for Ashbourne. I don't know if Councillor Dobbs can probably add to that, but it's obviously something that's been required for some time. So I think it's because we couldn't actually approve the expenditure at my committee. It's been referred to full council. So I can certainly recommend it and endorse the proposal. Now it's come to full council, but it's something that's going to increase the, I suppose, the scope of the monitoring exercise in Ashbourne, which I think all members of the Community Environment Committee did support at the time. Thank you.
Can I just ask, because I'd just like some context into it. Councillor Hobson, do you wish to say something? We don't. I just want to make sure that all members that weren't part of the committee are aware of what we're talking about when we talk about an EarthSense monitor.
Well, I'll say my bit now, because I was a member of that that committee, and I did challenge this expenditure on an additional EarthSense monitor, and there were various questions about it. So I have had confirmation from Derbyshire County Council today, just to confirm we are buying EarthSense air quality monitoring hardware for Ashbourne in support of a project that we've received DEFRA grant funding for. We will be happy to share the data and provide access to our back office systems for this. We're also willing to do a briefing at an appropriate time in the control room for Derbyshire Dales members and officers. I think with this, we all know about the Ashbourne air quality problem, the fact that they're going to have two, and we wanted to buy another one for £10,000. Paul's already asked us tonight to be mindful of financial challenges, and that was the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dobbs.
Would it be expedient if I proposed adoption of the recommendation from C&E and then talk to it? Would that help?
I think if we could shed some light on what we're talking about, and then we'll have some questions if people want to ask questions. I just want some clarity so people are aware of what we're actually talking about, and you know it better than most, I think.
Right. This is a real-time monitor. The leasing for 1 year is about £4,000. If we put it up ourselves, and apparently it's only 2 Jubilee clips, it's not hugely complicated, we can save the installation costs of £500. The additional £5,000 is if you want a public-facing website to make the information that it's gathering available to the public. So the bottom line for us is almost certainly around less than £5,000. What will it do? It will monitor NOx, it will monitor particulates, and we're not monitoring particulates at all at the moment, and yet we're the authority body which is charged with keeping an eye on such things. But the real thing that means we really must, and I do exhort you on this, to vote for this, we do need to get on and establish a baseline. Because I'm afraid to say that the monitors that I thought, and I thought there were 3 actually, from County Council would be in position by the end of the year, and I think I'm not alone in this room in thinking that that was the case. They're not there, and when I spoke to EarthSense, there's been some deferment of their order because probably they haven't got the money from government to spend until next financial year. Now, if we're not in there establishing a baseline, how will we know whether the County Council Action 1 project, which they're kind of rolling out, they're tweaking the traffic lights as at the moment, and they should actually be starting to implement that in the not too distant future. If we haven't established a baseline, we won't have a clue as to how effective it's going to be. So we've got to get out there, get it done, get a baseline established. And then, okay, fine, if county are going to put 2 there, this one could have its 2 Jubilee clips undone, it could be put somewhere else, it could be put in place for a matter of weeks, and then we can answer the question we've often made, well, what it's really like in Cromford, what's the periodic pattern of particulates and NOx in Cromford? These sorts of questions we will be able to address, and I come back to the fact we are the monitoring authority. I think we should have our own. I hope you agree. Thank you.
Any questions, please? Councillor Chapman?
Thanks, Chair. Ash, do I address questions to you on that on this?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, well, all right, generally then. I'd just like to ask what level of information, what level of data we've got on the air quality in Ashbourne, going back how many years, and how do we establish, and which of those data have established that there is a problem? And by the problem, I mean the levels of nitrous oxide, the particulate matter, etc., etc. Because do we have enough information already to know that there's that mitigating circumstances, mitigating actions need to be taken? Do we need to continue monitoring when we know there's a problem? And would the £10,000 be better going towards mitigation processes for that, to prevent that air quality? How much measurement do we need? I mean, and if somebody can give me the answer to that, of how many years it's been going on, and what data we have got, what figures, what concentrations, and surely we must be in a position where we know that we've got to do something about it.
Right, I think what basically we're being asked to do is, are we prepared to approve the actual paying of 10,000, the supplementary budget estimate of £10,000?
Well, Chair, I'm asking the validity of that.
Yeah.
Of that 10,000.
Were you at the meeting on
yeah.
Yes. So did
yeah,
you get a response?
I didn't. I voted against it.
Yeah, but did you get a response to your question there?
I didn't ask it.
Right. We'll have one more question, and that's from Councillor Whitehead, please.
Yes, I must say, I find this really confusing, because it seems to be a project that we're supposed to be working in partnership with Derbyshire County Council, who have already, or are in the process of purchasing 2 of these pieces of equipment. And because we don't have any confidence in their ability to deliver to timescales, we thought we'll take it out of their hands, we'll spend £10,000 of our taxpayers' money when we could be using that for different purposes. To me, this seems like a nonsense.
Anybody else? Councillor Dobbs? Well, Councillor Archer first then.
It wasn't a question, it was just for clarity for people who weren't at the meeting, just to clarify a point that was implied by Councillor Dobbs, just to make sure everyone understands for sure. This is a portable monitor, so although in the first instance it will be used to clarify measurements of particulates, in particular in Ashbourne, it would then be able to be redeployed in other areas as well. So just to make sure everyone is aware of that.
Councillor G.
Could I have this in Bakewell, please, in the centre of Bakewell, if it's not required in Ashbourne?
I think it is a question, and thank you for the question. I think it is movable, and I think it's an asset for this organisation, and it's for the decision to be made. I think what we need to do is we need to just move forward, and the best way to decide this is whether or not we want to is just put it to a vote. So does anybody want to move the actual item that's on there? Councillor Dobbs? Right, so are you moving it, Councillor Dobbs?
I am indeed, Chair.
Right.
I thought I was saying that first time round.
No,
but
no, sorry. I think the simple thing is that if we just vote on it, so Councillor Dobbs has moved it and Councillor Hughes has seconded it. So are there any more comments that anybody wants to make?
Sorry, Chair, can I answer some questions about it? I think a lot of people don't know the full story, and I think it would help enormously. To answer your question, we've actually only really started monitoring for NOx and NOx alone in Ashbourne seriously since about 2017, 2019. We've got trends at one particular point where it hasn't changed since then. It's still in the areas that DEFRA would regard, Environment Agency would regard as difficult, but slightly below the illegal limit, if you like. And we've got one incredibly high one at the top of Buxton Hill at the Wimble Lane interchange, and that is significantly over the air quality objective. We are not measuring particulates anywhere, and the recent changes to the Environment Act made this council responsible for ensuring that particulate levels decrease. I repeat, we don't even know what the particulate levels are anywhere at the moment. Without this device, or devices, we won't know. And if these are bolted to bits of Ashbourne and we don't have the ability to move them because they belong to the county council, we will never know what the particulates level are elsewhere, for example, in Bakewell.
Thank you. I'm going to...
Can I talk now as the seconder? I endorse what Peter Dobbs says about the need to monitor for particulates. Particulates are a real problem. They result in cardiac problems, pulmonary problems, also circulatory problems, and we do not know what the problem is in Derbyshire Dales. There are various areas of Derbyshire Dales where particulates may be high. The centre of Ashbourne is one, Cromford, the junction on the A6 in Cromford is another. They may very well be high in parts of Bakewell, which is subject to idling diesel engines for a lot of the day, particularly during the summer period. And so there is a problem. We don't know what size the problem is. The county council cannot tell us what the size of the problem is because they're not monitoring for particulates except potentially in Ashbourne at this stage. It is a duty. We have a duty concerning air quality, which is now covering particulates. Therefore, to fulfil our duty, we need to be able to monitor, and this gives us the ability to monitor. We probably need more of these things. One of the major sources of particulates are stoves and wood-burning stoves, and we don't know what the problem is away from roads in terms of particulates. So there is a need for us to understand this problem, not only in major road junctions, but potentially in other areas of our towns as well. So I fully endorse this purchase of a service for the provision of monitoring for particulate matter as well as NO2.
Thank you, David. We've got Councillor Whitehead, and then Councillor Murphy, and Councillor Lees, and then Councillor O'Brien, and then we'll go to a vote. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for the additional rationale, and it makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, the report in front of us only talks about purchasing this device for Ashbourne. I see no plan attached for rolling out to the rest of. So I would suggest to the committee, if they want approval, come back with a plan, because yeah, I'd like to have the air quality monitored in Cromford, probably in Matlock Bath as well. I'm sure there's many areas. But at the moment, I see nothing in this proposal that gives us a guarantee that if we spend £10,000, that plan is going to be enacted. So at the moment, it just seems like a waste of money because we already know the county are buying 2 for Ashbourne. Therefore, it seems unnecessary to buy a third just for that purpose. I would suggest maybe the committee come back with a plan that we can approve for a full rollout across the district, and that would be the most sensible approach.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's an observation on page 85, item 3. and we talk about the relationship we have with highways, county and whatever. But is it best served by us actually asking them again about 20 mile per hour speed limits on Buxton Hill and in that area of actual Ashbourne? Because when you look at the sort of the numbers of people who actually responded to the consultation, and you think about the population of the Ashbourne, you've got 3% of the population actually responded to that question, 134, 83 to 118 against. It's statistically insignificant. We haven't really got a mandate from the people of Ashbourne to go and sort of, ask highways to reconsider giving us a speed limit of 20 miles per hour. I spoke to a highways engineer today. I was talking about something completely different, and just come up in conversation about the some monitoring they did in November on Buxton Hill in Ashbourne. And if you look at the results, there's barely anybody up or down the hill in that area doing 20 miles an hour. Quite happy to share that information. I just don't see, that we've, got the people of Ashbourne on side on this particular item. So it just stood out to me today when I was reading this report, and it says here, given the level of public support. Well, there isn't that great a support. So, we need to be careful.
Thank you. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously, Councillor Dobbs and myself are on the ward with Buxton Hill on, but we're getting two which the county are going to provide. Surely this third one, or whatever, or even these two, they're going to be moved around the district. So I don't see the need for the third one. And it's not just about, even though, yes, it's my ward, Councillor Dobbs' ward, it's not just about Buxton Hill, it's about the Derbyshire Dales. So I presume that the county council will want to move these devices round to get a full understanding of the district, like Councillor Whitehead has alluded to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let's just remind ourselves that it was our Director of Regulatory Services who made this recommendation to the Community and Environment Committee, and he did so because in his professional opinion it was required to satisfy the requirements of preparing the Air Quality Management Action Plan. And let's remind ourselves that at the committee 14 members voted for it, 1 abstained. No one, we had the full debate, we repeated this debate at Community Environment Committee. 14 members voted for, 1 abstained, no one opposed to it. Now let's remind ourselves why are we debating this? Why are we discussing this? That's because we have an issue in Ashbourne where people's lives are being foreshortened by the quality of the air. And now we're prevaricating in the same way as we accuse the county council of prevaricating. Let's address the issue. Let's agree this proposal, and let's move forward, and let's have the evidence which enables us to put forward an action plan which will improve the health outcomes for the residents of Ashbourne. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. And just before we go to the vote, an observation that obviously the two monitors of the county will possibly be deployed at different parts of the county, not the district. So it does give us an opportunity to have some for ourselves. So it's been moved, it's been seconded. Can we please...
Can I speak again?
Well, I did say we would go to the vote because you've moved it, Councillor Hughes, and I'm looking at the time at 8:20.
Yeah, I think there's some points that need clarifying. First of all, the point that Councillor Murphy made, that was not something addressed to this meeting. It was just the minutes of the C&E, so we're not asked to consider that this time. And second point, if we don't authorise the expenditure at this point, we will have lost any data for the baseline before they implement their scheme. I don't know how indeed we will be able to fill in the relevant form for our action plan if we have no evidence of that nature. This is important. And I don't think there was ever any intention of the county council moving theirs around, because it was part of the action plan that they should have real-time monitoring in Ashbourne and warn people about the levels. If we want one to move around, if we want one quickly, there is only one option, and it's not going to cost £10,000. It costs a bit over £4,000, and that's, if we put it up ourselves, that will be it. Thank you.
Councillor Burford.
There seems to be a little bit of misinformation maybe coming across to me on this really important issue. So I'd like to ask for a recorded vote because it is such an important decision that we're making.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Hughes, and then we will go to a recorded vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, does that find a seconder for the recorded vote?
Yes.
Councillor Flitter will second that.
Thank you, Chair. If Peter is in agreement, then I would add Councillor Whitehead's proposal that officers will come back to the Community Environment Committee with a plan of how to use this sensor elsewhere in the district. Okay.
Can you just say that one more time while we write that down?
I think Peter's in agreement with this. That the officers establish a plan for moving it around the district so that it can be used to record NOx levels and particulate levels in different areas.
As required.
As required.
I'm comfortable with that, Chair. Yeah.
It's been moved and it's been seconded with that slight change, which we're both happy about. All those in favour of us referring this, of considering the recommendations and going for the £10,000 as per item 12. All those in favour, please. Oh, sorry, my fault. Yeah. So, Rusi, can you lead us through a recorded vote? Sorry about that, everyone.
Councillor Archer? Councillor Bates? Councillor Boynton? Councillor Bond? Councillor Boothroyd? Councillor Buckler?
4.
Councillor Martin Burfoot? Councillor Sue Burfoot? Councillor Burton?
4.
Councillor Buttle? 4. Councillor Chapman?
Abstain.
Councillor Dobbs?
4.
Councillor Edward Walker? Councillor Flitter?
4.
Councillor Franks?
4.
Councillor G? Councillor Gretrix? 4. Councillor Hobson? Councillor Hughes?
4.
Councillor Lees? Councillor Linthwaite?
4.
Councillor Maelstrom?
4.
Councillor Murphy? Councillor Nash? 4. Councillor O'Brien?
4.
Councillor Peacock?
4.
Councillor Ripton?
4.
Councillor Shelley? 4. Councillor Slack?
4.
Councillor Wayne?
4.
Councillor Whitehead?
4 with the amendment, yep.
Councillor Wilton?
4.
Carry.
Yeah, that's motion's therefore carried. Sorry about the error the first time. I forgot about that bit. Right, can we now move on to... well, first of all, before... I'm just mindful of time, and we're obviously going to have to recommend that the meeting, or we're going to ask whether the meeting can continue after 8:30. We've got 2 more items to deliberate upon. Does anybody need a short comfort break before we do?
Yes, please.
Yeah? Would like to move that... Do we have to move that there's a comfort... I'll second it. All those in favour? If you could get back to as close to 8:30 as we could. Actually, I just recommend that we can extend the meeting beyond 8:30. Would anybody like to second that? Well, Councillor Archer. All those in favour of extending for half an hour, or as long as it takes? Thank you. Yeah.
want to just...
Right, everyone, we're going to start again. Can we just, I know it was a bit of a rush because of the comfort break and everything, but I did move that we extend the meeting. If we could extend the meeting till 9 o'clock, that could be hopeful, but I'm hopeful. Would anybody like to second that? Councillor Archer second it. All those in favour to extend to 9 o'clock? Keep your hands up so they can... all those against? And have you got those? And any abstentions, please? No. Right, so now we'll move on. And we're going on to item 13, which is the vehicle replacement programme. The report requests that the transfer of £166,133 of funds already approved and allocated to the vehicle replacement programme for 2024-25 into the current financial year. Ash, would you like to lead us through this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. It's clear over the last week that the discussion surrounding this report has moved from what was initially intended to be a financial decision in transferring funds already committed to the next financial year back into this financial year, has actually moved into questions regarding the vehicle replacement programme and some concerns raised regarding the purchase of diesel vehicles. As members will know, you have a suggested amendment in front of you, but before we get to that point, I would just like to explain the reason for the suggested amendment, and that has come out of conversations that I've had individually with members and as part of some group discussions that I've been involved with as well. And some of those concerns, for the benefit of other members, is that we are perceived not to have been moving immediately to electric vehicles. And whilst we appreciate and share the aspiration to move to an electric fleet, I feel that officers have been quite clear that there is a process to go through. And that process includes ensuring that the infrastructure was in place to be able to charge the fleet, making sure that staff are suitably trained to undertake repair, maintenance, service and safety inspections on live electric feed and electric vehicles, and also go through the process of trialling vehicles to make sure that they're fit for purpose. There are a number of I don't want to say horror stories because it sounds dramatic, but looking at some of the expenditure on electric vehicles, there have been a number of authorities who have gone headlong into purchasing a fleet that hasn't actually been fit for purpose or hasn't had the desired effect that it would want to do. Given the council's financial position, we didn't want to do that. We have taken, I don't want to say cautious, but we have tried to learn from other authorities in doing so, and have worked closely with Nottingham City Council to understand their process and through their purchase and move to electric fleet vehicles. We gave commitments to trial the vehicles as part of the corporate plan, and that was approved it was the previous corporate plan, or the current one that's due to end soon, and we committed to trialling EV vehicles by the end of this financial year, and which we are on track to do. We also highlighted in the capital programme report in November 22 that we were working towards installing infrastructure at the depot at Northwood that sits with the Clean and Green, hence the fact that Sam, as Clean and Green manager, is with us to take to technical questions, to have that in place so we could move to electric fleet vehicles by June 2024. And I'm pleased to say that that work was completed at the back end of last year. However, in spirit of showing that we are listening to members' concerns, we do take them seriously, and we support your aspirations to do that. I have proposed the amendment. I don't intend to read it because I'm sure members will have checked it through. That being said, it would be remiss of us as officers not to highlight the risks with a change in tact from purchasing the vehicles to a proposed lease, and they are primarily around the cost of leasing vehicles, and also whilst there is a desire to move to electric fleet vehicles, we need to appreciate that there needs to be a suitable or like-for-like replacement for the work that is required of those vehicles. A part of the process of the vehicle replacement programme is that Sam and Joe Hill, who we've talked about this evening, will review the programme. They'll look at the vehicles, and we have the desire to move to an electric fleet where we can, but there does have to be a sequence of events that we have to follow, and also we have to factor in whether there is an appropriate vehicle available in the market. And the reason that we'd put the original request forward without the detail is because it was simply a belief that there isn't a suitable vehicle in the market at this moment in time, and we thought that this option offered the better value for money. I appreciate it's not an electric fleet vehicle, but the new diesel vehicles that we were proposing to buy were upgrading from Euro 5 emissions to Euro 6, so there would be a reduction in emissions. We would retain the functionality of the vehicle. We know that it did the work that we needed it to do. So there was a logic behind it. In terms of financing it, the costs are laid out in front of you in the recommendation for £166,000 for the replacement of 5 vehicles. The equivalent for lease, and members need to be mindful of this because this is one of the risks that's associated to the amendment that's in front of you, is to lease those vehicles is £47,000 per 6 months. No, for all of the 5 vehicles, sorry, for the 5 vehicles it's a £47,000 every 6 months that we want to lease that. I mean, Sam and the garage foreman have had to move quite quickly on this because we, listening to members' concerns this week. They're the quotes that we've got. There have been discussions with the supplier that we have and that we're in contract with. There is also a risk we might not get those vehicles. I'm going to pass over to Sam shortly just to highlight some of the issues surrounding supply. But bearing in mind the financial constraints, as I say, it would be remiss of us as officers not to highlight the cost difference between what was initially proposed to what is currently proposed. We absolutely respect the decision that members have put forward in the last week not to purchase vehicles and to lease them until there's a suitable EV replacement available, which is fine, but it is a significant change in funding. It's hard to say at this moment in time when that vehicle will be available on the market. We can't put a time frame on it. It depends when the technology is there and when the manufacturers are willing to produce vehicles that meet that necessary standard. Sam, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Thank you, Ash. Just a couple of points there. So just getting down to the nitty-gritty of no like-for-like vehicles, the real reason for these 5 vehicles is for towing. So our mowing teams and our parks teams, as well as our cemeteries teams, need to tow mini diggers, dumpers, water bowsers and mowers, and there is currently no electric vehicle, none at all, that can tow. And that really is kind of the end of the discussion because that isn't available to us in an electric form, unfortunately. The trajectory of the technology within electric vehicles, coming from the experts that we speak to, is that the distances and the safety around temperatures is more of a focus than towing, and they haven't had a focus on the towing ability for the last 3 years. So as Ash rightly points out, we don't know when that turnaround will be. That doesn't mean there isn't other vehicles on the fleet that would fit with the electric availability out there, but for these particular vehicles, that's the pressing point, that they are able to tow. The difficulty with the leasing is that we are in a contract, as most of you will know, and when we've spoken to them about the possibility of getting 5 vehicles by the end of March, which is when we would begin our mowing season, they currently have 1 that would fit our our specification that would need editing for towing. They don't know if they'd be able to get those 5, and obviously those are based on discussions we've had over the last 48 hours since this request has come in. That doesn't mean we can't find them elsewhere. That just means we'd have to go through a waiver process through yourselves and CLT to come out of that contract to be able to purchase the vehicles that we need to look for. And trying to find those 8 weeks before a mowing season is not going to be easy. But again, we'll do our best if that is what councillors wish us to do.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is not an amendment, this is a revised officer recommendation. This is a recommendation that was put forward by officers at 4:15 this afternoon, and the officers put forward recommendations if they consider them to be sound and deliverable. So on that basis, we have to assume that if officers put forward a recommendation, they consider it sound and deliverable. Is that the case, please?
Chair, if I can, I've been very clear with members who I've spoken to that there are challenges in doing this, but we will do our absolute utmost to make it work, but there are risks associated to it. But we are listening to what members have asked of officers, and we've taken an alternative view with an option to consider leasing, although, as I've said, and I think it's really important to labour the point, it will be a higher cost than we have already requested from the capital programme, because we don't know when those vehicles will be available. So whilst we can make it work, it is likely to require additional funds than those that have already been approved.
Thank you. Councillor Shelley, question?
Thank you. It's just a straightforward one, I think, unless I've missed something. Are we not in a position where we can extend the life of the existing fleet in order to delay this decision?
Through you, Chair. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we've already had to do that. These vehicles should be on our programme for 6 to 8 years. They're coming up to 10. And in line with the climate change movement that we wanted to do, any vehicles that are less efficient, and if there is more efficient vehicles out there, they were to be prioritised on the programme. So whether they were even 5 years old, but there's still an opportunity to make their emissions more environmentally friendly by going with a Euro 6 engine over a Euro 5. So yes, we've already extended their life by 2 or 3 years. They're currently costing us between 5 and 10 grand in maintenance, and that's a lot of time for 3 mechanics. So I hope that answers your question.
It does indeed, thank you. Just as a follow-up to that, if we were to acquire the new diesel vehicles, have you done any calculations about their resale value if we were able to move to an electric fleet sooner than we are perhaps fearing?
Yes, thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we have, because I think that's an important point to raise, because by buying these vehicles, we're not saying we cannot meet, or we're not trying to meet members' decision to be net zero by 2030. We're saying it's the best opportunity we have at the moment with these vehicles to become a more efficient service. Now, because these vehicles have a Euro 6 engine, if we were selling these between a year and 3 years, they would probably maintain up to 60 to 75% of their value, because the drop, because the drop in emissions and the equality base is, we can see these vehicles being past the national basis of 2030. So the diesel vehicles that you would be purchasing second-hand would be the Euro 6. So yes, that's the information that we've got. Again, these are based on conversations over the last 48 hours that we've tried to get hold of.
Councillor Grettrick's question.
So my question is, would it be a suitable compromise for us to buy vehicles as suggested, as recommended, and then later putting them back into the second-hand market in 2 to 3 years' time, by which time the availability of electric vehicles may be better served?
Through you, Chair.
Thank you.
Following the trajectory of the technology, I can't say that within 2 or 3 years that we'd have the fit for purpose on towing. But I can see that as a as a credible amendment. Yes.
Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. So, kind of a question about towing, actually, because I was under the impression that even a standard family electric car can tow up to 2,500 kilograms. So I was just a bit puzzled that you said there was no vehicles on the market at the moment that could tow. So what sort of weights are we looking at? And then my follow-up, kind of a supplementary question to that, then links back to kind of the engines again. So you say it's a Euro 6. Is it also AdBlue? So what are the actual emissions outputs from the vehicles themselves? So even if they're using diesel, are they polluting our communities? So two questions there.
Through you, Chair. So for the first one, sorry, I'll be more specific. So there is no rigid tippers that will hold towing, and the weights we're looking at is about 900 kg that we were looking at to tow on 3.5 ton vehicles. So there's no 3.5 ton rigid tippers that can provide that towing. So apologies for that. The second question, yes, they do take AdBlue. I would have to go. I can find the information out for you in terms of the emissions from these particular vehicles. I can find that out for you and get that information to you. Well, yes, yeah.
Councillor Peacock.
I was just wanting to know is that 47,000 per 6 months versus 166,000 up front. Are those truly like-for-like figures? Because doesn't leasing normally come with some costs included that you'd have to pay yourself if you owned the vehicles?
Through you, Chair. Yes, so I would say that's the minimum amount. So in terms of leasing and hires that we've experienced before, because they are industry vehicles and very well used, there's always a cost of returning them. So that's between 6 and 10 grand that we've had at the moment. However, the costings that we've got at the moment is the 166 grand would buy the 5 vehicles outright, and the 47,000 would be to hire those vehicles during the months of the mowing. So it's about 6 months. Does that answer your question?
Oh, I see. And we'd only need them for 6 months, so it's £47,000 per year potentially.
Well, we'd need those vehicles at least for 6 months. I can't tell you in 6 months' time or a year that this technology would be changed, but yeah, it'd be at least 6 months that we'd be asking for that. So say if it's a year, we're spending £100,000 on hire when 166 grand can be purchased of those vehicles.
Councillor Hobson, question?
Yeah, the little one to carry on from that one. So if you paid nearly 100 grand for 1 year, you couldn't just get a lease for 1 year anyway, could you? You'd have to get a long-term lease for that anyway, wouldn't you? You couldn't just have a lease for 1 year, could you?
Yes, you're right. In terms of leasing and hire, there can be differences, but I suppose in terms of our immediate need for mowing.
But they're not just going to let you lease something just for that short period of time, 5 vehicles.
Unlikely,
vehicle. No. Unlikely. So it's going to be a higher cost. They may not be suitable, and we might not be able to get them in time. And it just seems like, the world's gone mad. Paul's told us how we've got to be aware of financial challenges. I'm no expert, but these diesel vehicles, they're much more efficient than they used to be. Somebody has put pressure on these officers on the last minute to come with a recommendation.
Point of order. Can we have a question, please?
It's ridiculous. Do you
Councillor Hobson?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wilton.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It was really around the question of this feels really quick. If it's suddenly 8 weeks to do this, why is it all a surprise now? And I think that's probably where some of the conversations have led, is because it's felt rushed, and I think people have felt a little bit backed up as a result of that. And I think, why are we doing this so close to the mowing season? I think we'd all buy into this, and I think we slowly are, but we need to understand that time frame and why it was so short.
I'll take that, Chair, if you don't mind. Because the report was about moving finances, the vehicle replacement programme is a rolling programme that's in place, and it's got a rolling programme for 5 years. So it's not rushed in that sense. We were not asking members to determine which vehicles we should purchase. the conversation around the finances and why we're financing and what it's financing it for has evolved into that discussion. Officers, mainly Samantha, the garage foreman and Joe Hill, have been involved in reviewing that programme and identifying which vehicles are suitable to get us where we need to be over future years. So that it's not rushed. That programme has been presented and approved as part of the corporate plan. It's only evolved into this discussion because of this report. That's why it feels rushed. So it was not at all to do with vehicles. It was just about the financing of.
Councillor Sue Burford, please.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from previous questions, I wonder if I could ask the officers, as far as you're able to say, how far in terms of years are we off being able to buy or lease electric vehicles that can actually do the job that we require them to do? And also, I'm just wondering, following on from Councillor Gretrick's question, what's the market like for 2 to 3 year old X vehicles that we use? Because presumably the market's not that big.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for those. So I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you when they're going to be able to tow, but I can tell you there's other vehicles on our programme that lend themselves to electric more easily. So the toilet cleaners roll because they are light vehicle goods and they're not carrying anything. They're going distances between charging points, etc. So they'll be looked at in the next 18 months and will be considered. That's actually one of the trials that hopefully should be coming in the next few weeks, to be honest. The others are the cage vehicles. There's a good amount of research to say that they're very positive in the summer. They're not too great in the winter, so we might have a winter trial of that one. The pool vehicles that the supervisors and the team leaders use can also be electric. So because we have 8 or 9 different types of vehicles, just by buying these 5 does not mean we cannot make significant changes to other areas of the fleet.
Councillor Nash.
I think the bulk of my question has been answered already, but I am a bit confused by the answer about needing towing vehicles and that we can only lease them for half the year. So I'd like to clarify that, and then I've got a follow-up question if I can.
The mowing season is 6 months, but we do need these vehicles, so they would be kept more. That was just the price that we were able to get hold of in the last couple of days by able to talk to, can we get these now and can we have them for mowing season, so that it doesn't disrupt the next service that will come on board. And we would need them for more than that, as councillors have highlighted. It was just the first price that we could get hold of in terms of to be able to present something to you. And sorry, the second question was?
Well, the second question is, so if we were to lease these and there's nothing on the horizon for 2 years, we're going to pay the best part of £200,000 when we could just pay £160,000 now. It doesn't seem sensible.
Yes.
I think, to be honest, I've got 8 people that still need to speak on this, and I think we're all getting the flavour of where we're at. So has anybody got any questions that we haven't already covered about the size of the vehicles, what they can tow? Anybody? Right.
I have 2 questions, Chair.
Yeah, I'll just come to you in a minute then, Councillor Slack. I was just trying to expedite this, trying to get us to a bit of a better place, if you know what I mean. I'm mindful of the time. Some people didn't want us to do another half an hour from 8:30, but they've asked some very interesting questions in that time. However, I just want to move it on. So on my list is Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. First of all, I don't quite understand, if it was planned, why we were asked to shift the money from next financial year. And my second question, what does trialling actually look like? Presumably you get an electric vehicle and you use it. Presumably you pay something for that privilege, but doesn't that fit possibly into the programme?
Who's going to answer that one?
Chair, I'll take the first question if that's okay, and I'll hand over to Sam for the second one. It was a misunderstanding, frankly, Councillor Dobbs, when Sam and one of Karen's accountants. They meet regularly to review the budget position and the vehicle replacement programme, capital programme, so on and so forth. There was a misunderstanding as to when the Clean and Green review was to be implemented and would be finished. So the money had actually been transferred into the next financial year by error, not on anybody's in particular part, it was just an error and a misunderstanding. Had that not have taken place, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion.
No. Through you, Chair. The second question about demo and trials, actually, yes. So because we've got a very good relationship with Nottingham City Council, who've been consulting with us for the last 18 months, they have some vehicles that they're willing to allow us to demo for free. There's other companies that do want to come and showcase the electric fleets, obviously to get rid of those horror stories as well. So we can actually trial electric vehicles for short term for free.
If I can just briefly come back, I mean, Nottingham were an early adopter, but their fleet reflects early adoption, does it not?
Yes, it does. So we're also learning from some of their challenges. So as part of their grant funding that they received from the government to be able to go full electric in a certain amount of time, they were expected to have these discussions and encourage others and work through programs, which is who we're working with our vehicle replacement program and going through and learning from them. So our last visit to them was last summer when we actually started looking at these vehicles. So when we're talking about coming through it quickly, this is actually a kind of a 6 to 8 month procurement process that we have to go through to make sure that we get the right vehicle for you.
Councillor Boynton.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly the technology is not here for vehicles yet, with electric vehicles. Leasing is very expensive. So my question is, if we purchase diesel vehicles, what's the life expectancy of those? In other words, how long will we have for the technology to catch up for the next time that we swap the vehicles?
Through you, Chair. So that's hard to tell because because we maintain our own vehicles, we perhaps keep them for a lot longer than perhaps others can. So the current vehicle replacement programme has been between 6 and 8 years. Now COVID has shifted that significantly, so we have been able to I suppose put a plaster over certain vehicles, but there are others that absolutely need to be replaced. What was your second question, sorry?
No, that wasn't a question.
Okay,
how long we would have for technology to catch up. Obviously there's not a proper answer to that, but my point is that it would give us a chance if we purchase vehicles for technology to catch up.
It would, sorry, and yeah, the trajectory of the technology that we're seeing and that we're talking about experts is that towing isn't high on their agenda. It's getting that distances out and temperature concerns, and particularly those distances that we're trying to make in terms of holding the amount of equipment. So the towing doesn't seem to be in anyone's high priority at the moment, at present.
Thank you.
Right, I was rather optimistic. There have been 16 questions down here. Would somebody move that we go for another? I'm going to say till 9:45. So you'll move it. Anybody second that, please? Councillor Hughes seconding that. All those in favour to go till 9:45. All those against? And any abstentions, please? Yeah, that's carried. We'll go on with my list. Councillor Slack, can we have 2 quick questions, please?
Yeah, they'd be fairly quick questions. 2 questions, really. Firstly, you've known for quite a while that we're coming to the end of the life, haven't you, these vehicles? You said you kept them through COVID. Therefore, why didn't we have a workshop meeting, say 3 or 4 months ago, so we could explain to all the members all this information you're giving us now tonight? We could have digested the information, and that would have been more suitable to have a workshop meeting. That's my first question. My second question is, have you explored the idea of having used vehicles for 3 or 4 years? And then if the technology is there for hydrogen or electric vehicles, move into that area. Have you explored having used vehicles?
Thank you, Councillor
Which will come a lot cheaper.
Chair, I'll take the first question and attempt to answer the second one. Sam will pick up any loose ends there. But in terms of why wasn't it explained, well, the vehicle replacement programme is an operational matter that officers across the council, as I've said before, Joe Hill, Samantha, the garage foreman, review in line with costs, whether it fits in with us moving towards the electric fleet, hybrid options. As members are aware, we introduced 2 hybrid vehicles last year to the fleet. So it's not necessarily something that we would bring to members to ask your opinions on which vehicles we should purchase, because we looked at those officers as professionals to make those recommendations. That being said, it does sit as part of the capital programme, which members have approved, and in addition to that, the update on the vehicle replacement programme in terms of moving towards electric vehicles has been reported to the Climate Change Working Group. It was first reported on the 3rd of July, then on the 18th of September, and most recently on the 8th of January this year. So whilst I understand Councillor Slack's point, and I think there is some learning there in terms of presenting a report, which is why it's noted in the amendment that we could bring something to C&E to help members understand how officers determine the vehicle replacement programme and which vehicles are suitable or not. I think that is a sensible way forward. What I wouldn't want to do is to get into, with the greatest respect, members picking which vehicles that officers should be using in the clean and green team. And I do say that with the greatest respect, but it could become quite a lengthy meeting. On the second point, in terms of second-hand vehicles, Sam will be able to give a greater detail, but I think we're all well aware that the second-hand market for vehicles is still quite inflated as from previous years. And what it wouldn't offer is the technology and reduced emissions is unlikely to offer the technology for Euro 6 and AdBlue technology. And given the concerns that members have raised with the Sam and I over the last few days, environmental issues are a primary driver there.
Thank you. Councillor G.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm slightly bamboozled that this has gone on half an hour. At the beginning, the officers explained to us the situation. The diesel vehicles do the job. I was at Ashford Parish Council last night. They're asking me if we're going to meet their service level agreement in about 5 or 6 weeks. We need to give them the authority to get on with this. The electric vehicles won't do the job. These, we need them.
Point of order, Chair. Can we
have a question, please? Thank you.
Yeah, well, the question is why are we sitting here now debating this when we need to we need to trust our officers to do it? Because
Councillor Hughes.
Chair, I move that we move to a vote. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask for a recorded vote on the recommendation, which is actually spelt incorrectly? But can we have what we know exactly what we voted for, so our residents know exactly what their councillors have voted for with spending money?
Right. There's been a recommendation that we move to the vote, but first of all, we want somebody to move it. So is anybody prepared to move this revised officer recommendation? Councillor O'Brien.
Well, I'll move the recommendation, Chair, but I have to say I think I've been led a merry dance, and I think we've all been led a merry dance, I have to say. Sorry to have to say this, but I think we've led a merry dance over the past couple of days. A number of us asked that officers give a reconsideration to this proposal in order to see if we could bring the acquisition of these vehicles more in line with our climate change action plan. We left it to officers, and we asked officers to come up with a proposal which they were happy with. We put no pressure on them. We said, you come up with a proposal you're happy with. If you don't have a proposal you're happy with, tell us. And they came up with a proposal. They tweaked it at 4:15 this afternoon, and it's the proposal you have in front of us. Now, they have now spent the past half an hour telling us why that recommendation that they put to us is not feasible. Now, what sense is there in that? Why have you put a proposal to us, a recommendation to us to approve, and then spent half an hour telling us why you don't support it? I move the recommendation, Chair.
Does that find a seconder, please? Yes, it's the revised one. Councillor Flitter, put your microphone on and just say what you want to say. I'm still looking for a seconder to Councillor O'Brien's.
Well, let that seconder go, and then I need to correct some things.
Does Councillor O'Brien's revised officer recommendation, the one on the separate piece of paper here, does that find a seconder, please? That's not.
I'll second it, Chair, just to let it go to the vote. Otherwise, I think it's important that people know. I think this has all come about through a very unfortunate set of circumstances. And I think if it had been done in a different way, we might have been of a different opinion and we wouldn't have this amendment. But I've been contacting members and encouraging them in this particular direction because I thought there was an inconsistency of direction of change and going for all green vehicles with what was proposed. It also came as a huge shock when I had this agenda to find that this huge amount of money was going to be spent within days of us making a decision. That always red flags things to me. And I was very worried about it. I now know a great deal more than I did an hour ago. No, more than that, 3 hours ago, and certainly 36 hours ago.
Thank you, thank you. So the revised officer recommend.
Can I have a point of order, Chair?
I'm going
can I just have a quick point of order? Because
what are you calling a point of order about?
If we vote on this and vote it down, are we just not? Isn't the whole thing then off the table? Shouldn't we?
No.
Shouldn't someone else propose that we go back to the original?
No, that will happen.
Will it? Because
it
this is the recommendation now. This is it before us.
If this doesn't get voted, then somebody else can put another recommendation on the table.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So it's been moved and it's been seconded. And Councillor Flitter, do you wish to talk in debate?
Yes, I do.
On this revised officer recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just have to say, Chair, by 5 o'clock tonight, I'd just about lost the will to live because there's been so many emails, so many different points of view. And I think it's been rather unfair on our officers on some of the comments made tonight. They've done a sterling job. I've got a lot of respect for the officers involved, and to put them in this position is really not acceptable. I'm unsure whether I can support this amendment tonight because you know me. I'm not an idealist. I'm a realist, and I'm in full support of all the green issues that affect this council. And I sincerely hope that we can move to that target by 2030. But let's be realistic about this. Spending £47,000 for 6 months, within 2 years, we're going to pay as much, if not more, with maintenance on those vehicles than what we did if we'd have bought them, which will last approximately 8 years. So, as I think as well, and I have to say this, but I think this item on the agenda has been hijacked to suit some personal views, because this was about bringing forward a programme that's already been agreed to cater for a few vehicles that are no longer fit for purpose. Now, I don't want to be sat here answering questions in 6 months' time while that service has failed because we've not supplied the vehicles that is wanted there. I think it's rather remiss of people to take this attitude, and it's really concerning me that we're not being realistic in our views, and I certainly urge that we give the officers the authority that they had, but is wanting just to do it a little bit quicker than what was expected. Because if we don't, we're going to be asking questions about the public about why this service hasn't been done. And that's been pointed out by a few members opposite, that we really need to get on work with this. We don't want to be hanging about. We don't want to be spending money unnecessarily. and we want to be able to provide a service that's fit for purpose.
Thank you. Councillor Buttle, are you wanting to come into this debate?
I'd very much like to say a few words, if that's okay. I agree with Steve that we don't want to be wasting money, but I'm very concerned about the fact we're failing as a society to meet our carbon budget. We're looking at 2%, 2 degrees C over the next few years. Like we're certainly hit 1.5 already. Everything is just spiralling into disaster, and if we can't venture £46,000 on avoiding disaster, then we are totally doomed. And so while I'm absolutely in favour of not wasting money, I don't think actually bringing a full and proper discussion to council about, well, to the Community and Environment Committee about what's the best way for us to try and manage the transition to electric vehicles, and to actually bring it out of the Clean and Green team and into the public arena of democratic, accountable, what it is we're here to do. So although I do agree with Steve that we really shouldn't be wasting money, I think we have to make this choice and vote for the amendment put forward by or proposed by Peter O'Brien.
Thank you.
No, we're not.
Thank you. Can we just stay? Right. Finally, Councillor Hughes, and then we'll move to a vote.
Thank you, Chair. I support fully what Councillor Flitter and Councillor Hobson have said. £160,000, that's 166,000 against £47,000 for 6 months. It means that if we bought the vehicles and we scrapped them after 2 years, we would be in profit. So if an electric vehicle suitable for this purpose comes available in 2 years, we will have made the best economic decision. If one doesn't come forward in 2 years, then it will definitely be the best economic decision. There isn't a vehicle that will do the job now. We're putting sticking plasters on the vehicles that we've got. It seems to me that there's no option but to do what the officers originally recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hobson, I need to ask you a question before we go to the vote. Is this the vote that you're wanting the recorded vote on?
I'm wanting a recorded vote on the recommendation, the officer's recommendation.
Right. So does anybody second that recorded vote, please? Yes, this one that we're about. Right. Does excuse me, can we just have a little bit? We're just trying to get through this business, and I know it's not easy, and it's not easy from up here. Right. So Councillor Lees has seconded that. All those in favour of a recorded vote? Yeah. Right. Well, it's been. I'm not sure whether we need to. Right, can we just have a vote on the recorded vote, please?
Could I just sum up, please, Chair?
I'll come. All those in favour of a recorded vote, please. Is that carried? Lucy? Is that carried? No. Right, so we will have a recorded vote. Right. Now, it's for Councillor O'Brien to sum up, and then we'll move to the vote.
Chair, well, I want to apologise for my intemperate use of words. It is an issue which I feel strongly, and I very much agree with the points made by Councillor Buttle. There is a cost there's a financial cost, but there's an environmental cost, and we have to weigh one against the other. What I would say that if I had been told that there was no electric vehicle possible as a replacement, and therefore the electrification proposal was a non-starter, I think we could have saved a lot of time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we're going to have a recorded vote, if we can, Lucy, the second one this evening. So we are now voting on the revised officer. That's the one on the piece of paper from Councillor O'Brien's motion, so we're all aware. Thank you. Lucy?
Councillor Archer? Councillor Bates? Councillor Boynton? Councillor Bond? Councillor Boothroyd? Councillor Buckler?
Against.
Councillor Martin Burfoot, sorry. Councillor Sue Burfoot? Councillor Burton?
Against.
Councillor Buttle? Councillor Chapman?
Against.
Councillor Dobbs?
For.
Councillor Edwards Walker? Councillor Flitter? Councillor Franks?
Against.
Councillor G? Councillor Gretrix? Councillor Hobson? Councillor Hughes?
Against.
Councillor Lees? Councillor Linthwaite?
Against.
Councillor Maelstrom?
Against.
Councillor Murphy? Councillor Nash?
Against.
Councillor O'Brien?
For.
Councillor Peacock?
Against.
Councillor Ripton?
Against.
Councillor Shelley?
Against.
Councillor Slack?
Against.
Councillor Wayne?
Against.
Councillor Whitehead?
Against.
Councillor Wilton?
Against.
So that motion has fallen. Would anybody else like to put up another? Councillor Flitter?
Yes, Chair. I would like to show full support to our officer's original recommendation, and I'd like to move that.
I was going to second it in full solidarity with our officers. I think they've been put under extreme pressure, and I'm absolutely appalled that we're in this position this evening.
Thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. Do we need any more debate? That's the answer I wanted. So we'll move to the vote on the original motion on the agenda item, which is to approve the transfer of £166,133 from the 2024-25 budget vehicle replacement programme capital budget to the current year for the purchase of fleet vehicles. Are you wanting a recorded vote for this, anybody? No, we'll just move straight to the vote. All those in favour of that, please. And all those against? All those abstaining? That motion is carried. Thank you. Right, we need to move on to the final item, but I just need to mention to everybody that there is the possibility of going into a closed session if we start discussing or want to discuss anything to do with specifics on the actual contract with Freedom Leisure. So I would just urge people to exercise caution in anything they want to say. If they do want to do it, I'm happy to put the item into closed session. So it's item number 15 I'm moving to now, the Freedom Leisure additional funding due to the increased cost of energy. And Ash, are you going to deliver this?
I will do, Chair. I'll open the report and I will keep it brief.
Thank you.
Dave Turvey is with me, who has been liaising with Freedom's contract manager and Freedom Leisure generally. But in terms of the report, this has come as a result of a request from our leisure service provider, Freedom Leisure. Returning members will be well aware of previous requests, but for the benefit of new members, we had a request in November, prior to November 2022, that was approved in that November for support with increased costs in utilities. And the council approved no more than £204,000 in support at that time. In February 2023, Freedom Leisure returned with a request for £730,000 for support with increased utilities. That was not agreed, it didn't even make it to council decision. Officers held a workshop with members, outlined their concerns, which was shared by members. That was relayed to Freedom Leisure. Freedom Leisure returned after trying to renegotiate certain energy contracts and make amendments to service. And in June 2023, they returned with a reviewed position requesting £405,000 in support. Again, this was not agreed. Officers had a workshop with members, outlined the concerns. That again was supported by members. There was a feeling that there would be some willingness to support, but not at the level that was proposed. Freedom Leisure at the time in June received some funding from central government, and they have been able to renegotiate contracts, and they have since returned with an amended version which equates to £151,000 over 3 years. I need to make members aware that, as with previous levels of support that the council offered Freedom, both in COVID and with the increase in utility costs, this isn't a cheque that we're giving to Freedom. It isn't a full amount. It is evaluated and reviewed on a monthly basis in the contract meetings between Dave Turvey or Rebecca Cummins when she's not on maternity leave, and it's done through open book accounting. So where Freedom haven't required the funding, we have not paid the money. They've been, in fairness to them, they've been very frugal during the COVID period, and I've highlighted the costs where they asked for up to £366,000 during the pandemic, but in fact only spent £182,670. So the council didn't spend the full amount. That may be the case in this instance, but we're asking for the allocation as outlined in the recommendation over the 3 years. With an important point to note in recommendation 3, that we will insist that any funds provided by the council is ring-fenced by Freedom for the Derbyshire Dales contract. It is not to support their business elsewhere. That's it from me, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Flitter, question.
Yeah, just one question, Chair. It's been brought to, well, I've had conversations with a few members that are interested in showing faith with Freedom Leisure. And the question came about, can we actually move into an extension of this contract with Freedom at this time? And I'd like to know from the officers what their opinion is on that, noting that we are in a contract and there may be limitations.
Chair, there is a mechanism within the contract that was built in for discussions should we wish to pursue that. However, there are certain criteria that we need to consider. We also need to have a clear view on public procurement regulations and where we stand with that. So I can't give a definitive answer tonight, but if it's something that members wish for us to explore as officers, we can do that.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Ash. Good report. I kind of completely understand kind of why we need to put this support in. So just 2 questions on it. One is a kind of report to saying that we'll see energy costs can see some significant decreases over the next 12 months. The Cornwall Institute, the track the data. I think that. So will there be anything built in that if we do see energy costs coming down, will there be some movement in terms of the agreement with Freedom Leisure? So question 1. Question 2 is really for an officer's kind of point of view, not a Freedom Leisure, just in terms of contingency planning. Kind of are we well prepared for all the kind of eventualities? Should we get to the next contract period and kind of just want to sort of assurance that we plan the contingency for whatever the risks are, and that could be services falling back to us or continuing with Freedom. But I just wanted that assurance that we do that planning really early and we don't leave that to like the last year of the contract.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the first point, in terms of the change of energy
tariffs and prices. They are looking to sort of negotiate and get better prices at all opportunities, which we have just seen come in. So some of the figures members will remember from the meeting we did in June, you saw sort of extraordinary increases for Ashbourne. They were nearly 500%. You know, that has come down drastically. They've got a new deal that came in actually on the 5th of January, so they do start to profile into the assumptions those figures. It's not all known yet, because a lot of the projects that we've been doing as well under the decarbonisation work, a lot of that's also just came into place. So actually getting complete figures and actuals, they're not at that stage because they've not had a year to sort of base it on, but they are always reprofiling on the new energy costs and new projects that are going ahead. I'll pick up the second point if I can, Chair. In terms of contingency planning, we've got just over 4 years left on the current contract. It is part of our risk register to monitor those. We have the contract meetings and monthly contract meetings, as I mentioned earlier. We also have an annual performance review of service and contract performance. So we monitor their position with that. It took approximately 2 years to procure or to outsource the service, and I would anticipate it would take something similar. Having said that, if the worst case scenario, Freedom were to fold, we operated that service prior to Freedom taking on the contract, so we do have expertise and understanding of those facilities. It would obviously require a significant increase in costs, and it would be a decision that members would have to take. But in terms of making sure we could open the doors, yes.
Thank you very much. Could we, Councillor Hughes, could we have quick questions now, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fully aware of the numbers for the next year for the electricity costs in Ashbourne, which do seem to be very, very high. Can I come to another point, though, that we are currently looking at projects for spending UK SPF grant funding. And it seems to me that looking at the electricity usage in Ashbourne and the electricity usage in Matlock, over and above the combined heat and power provision in Matlock, there is an opportunity for placing solar panels, mitigating some of that electricity use through the use of solar panels over the car parks in those areas. And it strikes me that is potentially a good use of UK SPF funds. Can I ask that a proposal is made to Steve Capes on the basis that for funding through the UK SPF fund, the provision of solar panels to provide electricity for Ashbourne and Matlock, and potentially for any of the other centres. Doing a calculation, the electricity usage in Matlock is about the same as 1,500 houses. So there is a considerable amount of electricity used in Ashbourne, and the same is true now of Ashbourne, having moved to heat pumps. So can I suggest that this would be an important and very valuable benefit in terms of reducing our carbon emissions, far greater than moving to 5 electric tipper lorries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of on the sort of upgrades and changes, the decarbonisation programmes were very much tailored towards the climate change initiatives from the government at the time. So that is why we've seen such a sort of large increase in costs. But with this was done back in like 2021. So now with the tariff increases, that's caused a bit of a increase in costs, which is a problem that we're having to deal with in our own buildings, not just the leisure centres. We have got £217,000 worth of bid in with Swim England Sport Swimming Pool Support Fund, which we're due an answer any time in the next 2 weeks to whether we've been successful or not. I wouldn't get any hopes up there because it was very much oversubscribed, and they do look at things like area of deprivation and buildings really at risk of closure. But if we do get anything from that, obviously we'll be able to even do more work, and it does include solar panels at the swimming pool sites.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien.
If that fails, can we look at the UK SPF?
Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In their submission to us, in support of the request for the £151,000, Freedom Leisure have offered that their forecast for next year, 2024-25, is predicated on what they term a review of viability and sustainability of in-centre products. Can you confirm what it precisely is meant by the review of viability and sustainability of in-centre products? Does it, for example, mean the cessation of certain products or services, such as swimming lessons, or in fact swimming entirely? And why is there not any conditionality on the recommendation to support the funding to the tune of 151,000? Why is that not conditioned on the current incentive products being retained, and certainly not having their pricing increased to exorbitant levels?
Chair, just to give some reassurance to Councillor O'Brien and other members, when the contract was drawn up and it was agreed, it was part of the discussion with members. In fact, I recall it being part of the report that was approved by members. There were certain aspects of the service that we protected, and that was things like swimming lessons. It was ensuring that concessionary rates or certain services couldn't be inflated beyond inflation, whereas other aspects of the service, such as gym memberships, they could be market driven, they could allow to be competitive, because it is a competitive market. But there were aspects of the service that we've protected, and Freedom Leisure couldn't just stop swimming lessons if they wanted to. It would have to be through discussion with the district council, and that isn't something that we would support. So there are products and services that they can change, certain activity sessions or classes that they do. That's within their prerogative, and that's the contract that we drew up. But there are protected programmes and prices within the contract.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick question. If Freedom Leisure's energy bills go down through solar panels at Wordsworth, Ashburn and Matlock, will that saving be passed on to us, or will it be returned to us some way, Ash?
Thank you, Chair. As sort of mentioned when Ash presented the report, this isn't just sort of a cheque for that amount. So any savings that can be made, whether that's through increasing income or a better energy or less consumption of energy, then the amount given would be less. If they can get to that not being a deficit in year 2 or 3, then we wouldn't be paying them anything. These are just the profile figures and the predictions at this stage.
Thank you, Dave.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hughes raised the point I was going to raise about decarbonisation, and Dave's answered the question. I think it's something we do need to bear in mind.
Most definitely. Councillor Buckler, finally.
Yeah, there's been a successful pilot of deep green data centres recently. I don't know whether officers have seen that. Octopus Energy have advised they're going to do another 150 of them. Have we investigated that for Matlock, which because there's a significant savings in terms of heating water available from them, the cost of which is zero for us to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We are aware of those. I was involved in the initial discussions around that, and I know that it is something that's still being explored, but the initial thought was that those data centres need to be relatively close to facilities or larger buildings, which we didn't with servers. I don't profess to be an expert on this by any means, but that was the initial feedback that we got, and there wasn't any suitable sites within range. That being said, I know that similar and perhaps the same is still being explored. It's something that I'd have to have a chat with Joe Hill about, and I can come back to you on it, but it is something that we were aware. It made the national news, but like I say, I am no expert on that field.
Thanks, that'd be great.
That's great. Well, we've had the questions, and now we've got 3 recommendations on the report. Would anybody like to move any recommendations? Councillor Whitehead, does that find a seconder? Councillor Peacock seconding. Do you wish to make any comment, Councillor Whitehead?
No, just happy to move to a vote as quickly as possible.
Right then, so it's been moved and it's been seconded. Have we got anybody who wants to speak in debate? Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, Chair. I feel I need to point out that we've seen over the years of this contract with Freedom Leisure a series of what I would call existential threats to the future of the swimming pool at Bakewell Leisure Centre. It's been made clear in the presentation from Freedom Leisure that if this funding is not supported, they will impose drastic cuts on the leisure service. So I'd like to take this opportunity to reassure the people of Bakewell that as long as myself and I'm sure my Labour colleagues are partners in this administration, Bakewell Pool will remain open.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was just going to mention something on those lines, because there are members of the public that say, well, the money that you're spending could be spent elsewhere. But it is our commitment as an alliance to fund and keep open leisure centres and facilities for as long as possible. And we all know all around the country leisure centres and leisure facilities are being cut. We want to keep that far in the future, so we will be supporting. And what we've got to remember is that although we're paying out a large sum of money again this year, it's still a heck of a lot cheaper than what it would be if we had to run those services ourselves. So I give credit to our officers all the way around the table that have been involved in these negotiations. I do have some concerns because there are some members of the public complaining that things like facilities within the leisure centres are not up to standard. I did raise this a couple of months ago, but I would like our officers to investigate on their deliberations so that we've got a high standard of facility, costed out, and I give this full support.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor G.
Yeah, just one last one. Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that my understanding is that in agreeing to this additional funding to Freedom Leisure, because we had that large meeting, was it last summer, that it is on the basis that they're keeping the same service level agreement in terms of opening hours at all 4 leisure centres, including, of course, Bakewell, which is close to my heart, but Ashbourne, Wirksworth and Matlock. And also, I should point out, I've got some eyes on the ground, having 2 daughters who are lifeguards. So they tell me what happens there.
Right then, so it's been moved and it's been seconded. And so can we move to the vote on the 3 recommendations as an agenda item 15, sorry. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstainees? No, that's great. So that brings us to the end of the business, and I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time and their patience. Thank you. Good evening.